Should be clear. Okay, we'll get started in about a minute or so. Okay, just so everyone knows in the room, good morning. We are going to first present the resolution for, the certificates for our SWAT cycle. And I'll invite Chief Joey Cruz, because there's more than one Chief Joey, up to join us. And then also the resolution for the police week, law enforcement week. And this is with Guam Police Department, the Port Authority of Guam, and Guam International Airport. So after we present the certificates, I'll call on the heads of the Guam Police Department, already here, the International Airport, and Port Authority. Okay? And then we will take like a 5 to 10 minute break and swing into the post-commission informational hearing. Okay? All right. Thank you all for being here. Can I just stand up normal and you can hear me like this? Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, we're ready. Thank you. Buenas and Hoffa Day, the Committee on Housing, Utilities, Public Safety, and Homeland Security would like to award and recognize outstanding officers today, those that have completed the SWAT 10 cycle. We're very proud of you, and really it's an elite force, right? And I'm happy to say that I personally know one of our recipients of the certificate. So congratulations to all of you for your hard work. I know it's not easy. If you look at the police chief to my right, you can tell that it's not easy. But thank you all for being here today in honor of our officers that have completed the SWAT cycle. And I'd like to invite Senator San Augustine to say a few words.
You know, gentlemen, as they recognize today the SWAT, I was in the police force in 1977. They used to be called SED, the Special Enforcement Division. And I know that the graduation from SED to SWAT was a tremendous time. I know that the SWAT contributed to the people of Guam. You saved lives. Sometimes you intervene where you needed to. And some folks don't understand that you're not there to harass them, you're there to protect them from themselves. And I have to admit that you guys have done a great job, and we do look forward to more success in the police department. Maybe one day everybody in blue, what I used to wear, will be all in green. But then again, I was in green, retired. But thank you, gentlemen.
All right, so I'd like to call up P.O.S.T. Keith Corpus. Please join us. P.O.1 Jesse J. San Nicholas. Okay. Officer San Nicholas is on duty. Thank you for serving. P.O.T. Wade Williams. And P.O.1 Daryl Cabrera. Oh, who was the class commander? Okay, this is to congratulate all of you on your achievements and dedication towards your successful completion of the Guam Police Department SWAT cycle, and to further commend you for your efforts and commitment to improving the safety and protection of the people of Guam. The Committee of Rules of Imanay Santay Pachu, na Legislature in Guahan, herein directs that this official expression of its recognition, congratulations, and commendations be forthwith sent on behalf of Legislature, Guam, and the people of Guam. Signed and sealed in the city of Baganya, Guam on the 16th day of May, 2017. Please give them another round of applause. And then can we just gather for a quick picture taking? Sure. If you come on both sides. Officer Williams, I'm just joking with you, you know. Okay. Now we'd like to do a resolution presentation. This is for our police week. So I'd like to invite our airport authority member and our Port Authority chief. Thank you, gentlemen. I just want to say that, you know, it's very humbling to be the only female up here around these very strong and very courageous men and leaders. So thank you, chiefs, for your service. And we really appreciate all the hard work you guys do. And you guys are doing a great job, so don't stop. Relative to recognizing, commending, and honoring the men and women of the Guam Police Department, the Port Authority of Guam, the Antonio B. Wonpat International Airport Authority Police, and other local and federal law enforcement agencies, for their commitment to safeguarding our island and to further paying tribute to them as they celebrate the occasion of 2017 Guam Police Week. Be resolved by the Committee on Rules of the Manaksan Saquachu, Nalehalastor and Guahan, whereas President John F. Kennedy proclaimed May 15th as National Peace Officers Memorial Day, and the calendar week in which May 15th falls as National Police Week, where the island and the nation pay recognition to those law enforcement officers who lost their lives in the line of duty for the safety and protection of others. And whereas Guam and the nation observed Peace Officers Memorial Day on Monday, May 15th, 2017, in honor of law enforcement officers who, through their courageous deeds, made the ultimate sacrifice in service to their country, or who became injured or disabled in the performance of duty. And it is fitting and appropriate to recognize and pay respect to the survivors of these fallen heroes, which include CO Francisco Mauri John Isisaki, P.O.S.T. John M. Santos, Larry D. Wallace, Francisco A. Regis, Helen K. Lizama, Tomas M. Sablan, Rudy Iglesias, Sigfred Mortera, Raymond Sanchez, Manuel Aquino, Lieutenant Francisco Tovis, Douglas W. Moshburn, Stacy E. LeVay, Eddie Santos, Francisco Tardigree, and Sergeant Frankie Eugene Smith. And whereas the uniformed personnel of the Guam Police Departments, the Port Authority of Guam Police, the Antonio B. Wonpat International Airport Authority Police, and other local and law enforcement agencies play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedom of the community of Guam. And it is important that all citizens know and understand the duties and responsibilities and hazards of Guam's law enforcement officers, and that the officer of Guam's law enforcement department and agencies recognize their duty to serve the people by safeguarding life and prosperity, protecting them against violence and disorder, and protecting the innocent against deception and the weak against oppression. And whereas every day Guam's law enforcement officers face the threat of violence and danger, and they routinely put their lives on the line to defend ours, and the price of that bravery may result in injury, disability, or even death. And whereas it is also fitting for Imana 34, Nali Halastor and Guahan, sincerely express its deepest gratitude to the family members and loved ones of all of our law enforcement officers, and acknowledge them for their indirect service to the people of Guam in providing the necessary support and encouragement to these men and women in uniform who serve and protect our island and our people. Senator, would you like to close it out?
Whereas, use the mic. Let us observe and commemorate this occasion of the Police Week by honoring all our law enforcement officers, past and present, who by their faithful and loyal devotion to their responsibilities have rendered dedicated service to their communities, and in so doing, have established for themselves noble and enduring reputations for preserving the right and security of all citizens. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Committee of Rules of Mina 34 na Legislature in Guam does hereby, on behalf of the Legislature in Guam, the people of Guam, recognize and commend and honor the men and women of the Guam Police Department, the Port Authority of Guam Police, the Antonio A.B. Wampat International Airport Authority Police, and other local and federal law enforcement agencies for their commitment to safeguarding our island, and does further pay tribute to them as they celebrate the occasion of 2017 Guam Police Week, and be it further resolved that the Speaker and the Chairperson of the Committee on Rules certify and the Legislature attest to the adoption hereof, and that copies of the same be thereafter transmitted to Mr. Joseph I. Cruz, Chief, Guam Police Department, to Ms. Doris Aguero, Chief, Port Authority of Guam Police, to Mr. Robert Camacho, Chief, Antonio B. Wampa International Airport Authority Police, and to the Honorable Edward J. B. Calvo, Imagalayan, Guam. Duly and regularly adopted by the Committee of Rules, Imena 34, as the Turan Guam, the 16th day of May 2017. Benjamin J. F. Cruz, Speaker, Michael F. Kusnikas, Chairperson, Committee on Rules, and Regina Besco Lee, Legislative Secretary.
I just want to say thank you to all of the officers for coming here today. Thank you for what you do, and thank you for continually putting your lives on the lines to serve our island and its people. It's very essential what it is that you do. You keep order, and you also, especially with the way you've been addressing a lot of the issues on our islands, You've not only been acting as law enforcers, but you've been acting with a lot of compassion and a lot of professionalism and respect for our island's people. So thank you so much for that, Mr. Chair. Just in closing, all of you are always in my prayers, and I ask also that you continue to pray for each other, and that you pray for those who have been killed in action, as we would say in the military. So thank you very much. Okay, so we're just going to take a quick 5-minute break, and then we'll proceed with the post-commission information hearing, okay? Thank you, everyone. we're ready. Half a day and good morning. Thank you all for being here. The informational briefing by the Committee on Housing, Utilities, and Public Safety, Homeland Security is now called to order. It is now 10:32. For the record, and in accordance with 5 GCA Chapter 8, Subsection 8107, notices were sent out via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets on May 12, 2017, and the second notice on May 16, 2017. With me today, I have Senator Joseph Augustine, who is a former police officer. Thank you, Senator, for being here. The purpose of this informational briefing is to help the committee and the general public to understand issues of concern regarding the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission. With us today, we have, may I get the roster, please? Just of the ones that will be testifying or providing testimony orally. Thank you. Police Chief Joseph J.I. Cruz, Joe Cruz, Mr. Corpus, Tim Santos. Okay. I'm just going to call you all out because this looks like the roster for everyone here. All right. Chief Joey Siniclas, Fire Chief Joey Siniclas, Post Commissioners, Mr. Santo Tomas, Airport Police, Mr. Camacho, Customs and Quarantine, Mr. Perez, Colonel Roberto, Major Brennan, Chief Pangilinan, and can you just state your name? And the Office of the Attorney General Representative. I'd also like to thank my colleague, Senator Ada, for being with us today. Thank you, Senator. We are convening today because the post-implementation, the PFQT standards are fast approaching, and it has been a concern of mine to ensure that our peace officers are able to meet the requirements. And so I thank all of you gentlemen and women for you being here today. We can start off with the post-commission's introduction and a brief of their concerns, and then we can move from there. Thank you.
Good morning, ma'am. Thank you again for hearing us, and the post-commission appreciates your time to address the situation. Back in 2014, December, we passed the post-commission law regarding our PFQT. Of course, during that time, as we implemented it, we decided as a committee, as a commission, that the Air Force standards was very similar to what our needs were. And it was based basically on three premises. One is that it was performance-based, statistically based, and scientifically based. So with those three areas of criteria, we felt the physical fitness standards of the Air Force would be appropriate to be implemented. However, as we went along, and of course the AFI, the Air Force instruction is quite lengthy, and we kept on coming into different questions regarding the implementation, such as the other parts of the chapter. The physical fitness part, of course, it was just one part of the AFI, but the other areas, such as having a wellness coordinator, dietitian, and a wellness center, those areas we just didn't have opportunities as far as for each agency to avail to all the officers. So there are many aspects regarding that implementation that was brought to question. And so what we did, we looked at it, and then we also conducted our physical fitness training. And unfortunately, as we went along, we didn't realize the magnitude of some of our officers who were not able to perform the basic physical fitness standards. And that standard is 1.5 miles, sit-ups and push-ups. And it's all based on age and gender, not on performance or what have you. It's just a generic standard. So when we started to test our officers throughout our law enforcement community, we found out that many agencies were not up to par. Some were at 16%, some were at 30%, some 70% or 30%. So we knew then that, of course, we had a lot of work to do. And as of last year, we started to talk about our concern that if we start implementing it by December of this year, many of people are going to be put on notice for not meeting the criteria. And of course, there's going to be some legal avenues for them to make up the test, like 3 months or so, almost up to a year. By the time a year comes along, that's when it'll have an actual impact on their physical fitness. So it was brought up also by the chief of police, and he has a full presentation on that. But as a committee, overall, we were of course concerned that we could not meet those standards as we expected, you know. So what we did with the AG actually made a proposal to make some adjustments, and those adjustments was the 39 inches on the waistline was to be waived, and instead of 1.5 miles for 1 mile. Those two changes in the PFQT made some dramatic changes in the scoring, overall scoring. And like with the airport, we went from 16 to 45%. The courts went from 70 to 90%, I believe. 95% were passing. And they also, with the GPD, I can't recall the actual increase. But it did have a significant improvement as far as the overall. And we also have to acknowledge, though, that many of our officers are on profile, and that also reflected on the stats. Many of them are unable to perform due to existing conditions, physical fitness, whatever. So those things were considered also. So as we tried that, we also, the Attorney General's office, Basil Malinex, our representative, recommended that we go to the solicitor and make sure that we are in keeping with the law. Monty May came back and says we cannot make those changes without coming to the legislature. We actually believe that we could, but through the AG's office, he said we could not make those changes, still in keeping with the spirit of the AFI. So because in the law it says something similar to the AFI, we thought that maybe that could fall into that category, but we were advised that we should come back to you guys, to the legislature, and make those changes appropriately. So as our recommendation, with all those different challenges that we had, we recommended for an extension of the implementation. And I'll just kind of read this off to you here.
Chief, pardon me, before you move any further, can we get a copy of what you're about to request?
Yes.
I'd also like to thank Speaker Cruz for being present, Senator Fernando Esteves, and Senator Mary Torres, and Colonel Borja. Thank you for attending too.
Yeah, and more specifically, Senators, we do not want to reduce, the quality of the office, the force of the law enforcement agencies. We do want to have a standard, but we want to have something that is also feasible, given our laws and our financial constraints, and also to be fair to the officers that are in the force currently. And so what our request is that the Post Commission be modeled similarly, but not equivalent to the U.S. Physical Fitness Test. The other part is the Post Commission to be granted the authority to make legitimate changes to the PFQT as deemed necessary by the Commission in order to able to support the law enforcement agency's demanding mission requirements and the need to maintain an effective force at all times. And this will be also under the advisement of a physical fitness coordinator and also with somebody who's certified as a fitness coordinator, and also with medical experts in physical fitness. The Post Commission is requesting to be granted additional 2 years for full PFQT implementation, 2019 versus 2017. And the peace officers will continue to be administered PFQT within the respective agencies. The Post Commission also, standards will be exempted from are requesting to be exempted from the administrative adjudication law, so that we can implement it without any delay if possible. And I know that when we first talked about this, there's a bit of hesitation, of course, because we don't want the public to perceive us as someone that we're lowering our standards again, even before it's being implemented. But as the Commission, the majority of the chiefs recommended this because they were just concerned that we were not be able to adequately keep the community safe if a high percentage of our officers are dismissed or terminated or transferred to another agency because they can't fit the physical fitness. So again, this is something that we looked hard upon, and we just don't want to implement something without do a thorough review of all the ramifications of these changes. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, good morning, Madam Chair, Senators, Torres, Lara, San Agustin, Castro, Esteves, and Vice Speaker. Good morning, and thank you for and Speaker. Please, again, thank you again for affording us the opportunity as a Post Commission to meet with you and to give you an update on what the Commission has been up to for the past several years, even under the prior legislature. With that handout that I've provided you, the second page provides the membership of all who's in the Post Commission. Again, it's inclusive of all the law enforcement agencies on the island, as well as GCC and UOG and the AG's office. On the next page, it kind of gives you a brief history of where the Post started and how it was formulated way back in 1998, although not much movement occurred back then. Then eventually it was moved to Chapter 51, and then the next change to it, the next major change to it was a membership composition change, which fixed it to what it is today, which includes all of our law enforcement agencies, as you see on the previous page. The next bullet designated GCC as the training agency for Post Commission. I believe what was happening prior to that was the Post Commission was having great difficulty finding a stable place to hold its meetings. So it was what was missing was a lot of its logistic and administrative support, with which now GCC provides. They provide me, because I'm an employee of GCC, but working as the executive director, as well as the venue for all of the meetings and other administrative support. So that since that law went into place, we don't have much of a problem with that anymore. We're allowing us to then focus on the Post issues at hand. And lastly, the last bullet there, as per the last Public Law 32-232, December 2012, that was the law that actually put the academic and fitness and training standards into place as it is today. On the next page, try to keep this short and sweet so we don't have to go into a whole litany. Just to give you a quick update on what Post has been doing to date. We have successfully, as a commission, established academic training and fitness standards, and that is written into public law. We have been working with Department Administration as well as the respective law enforcement agencies to make sure they are complying with these standards and implementing these standards and following them with regards to hiring officers and promoting officers and so forth. The Post Commission has also established supervisory, management, and executive criteria for positions in that level. Prior to that, there was no standards as to who would be and what qualified individuals to fill those positions. And lastly, all of the law enforcement agencies on Guam have been working hard to implement physical fitness into their line of work, into their daily programs. They have been having their officers undergo medical evaluations if there's any issues that may prohibit or prevent them from doing this PFQT that we're here to discuss about today. And agencies continue to administer the PFQT as it stands today. And as Chief Bob Camacho told you, as the way the law is written today, it's written that the PFQT is equivalent to the U.S. Air Force fitness test. So that's much of the reason it was why we're here today, is to try and ask for some reprieve and greater flexibility, so that as a Post Commission we can adjust accordingly to help support our law enforcement agencies. Okay, so challenges. Challenges today is, like I just said, it's equivalent right now, and we need it to be more similar, modeled after whatever verbiage we use, but to change the law so that it's no longer just equivalent, but something similar to or modeled after. Second bullet, the Post Commission also lacks the legal authority for that implementation of changes that we need. That needs to be modified in the law as well, so that we have the flexibility. And also the third bullet is we voted on our last Post Commission meeting that we be given a reprieve of an additional 2 years for full implementation of the program, and also it'll give us the time to make the necessary changes to the public law. So what do we need from the Legislature? On the second to the last page, I believe Chief Bob Camacho covered all of these already, but I'm willing to work with your staff, Senator, to work on the actual verbiage of this, so we can put this into legal verbiage. And so short and sweet, this is basically why we're here today. I do have all the chiefs and directors from the respective agencies, and certainly they can speak about how they feel about the PFQT and how it affects their agencies and what they've been doing. They're all here to discuss that as well, if you would like to hear testimony from them as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Santo Tomas. I would like to go through all agencies and then have the senators open the floor for the senators' questions if they should have any. So perhaps we can start with you, Chief Cruz.
Before I begin, Madam Chair, a copy of my testimony I submitted when I first walked in, so that should be made available to you. A copy of a PowerPoint presentation that we prepared. Lieutenant Torrey has that. He can hand that to you for your committee's review as well, as I'm providing my testimony. Manana Saduas and Hafaday, good afternoon, good morning, Madam Chair and members of the Committee on Housing, Utilities, Public Safety, and Homeland Security. I am Joseph Cruz, and I am the Chief of Police for the Guam Police Department, and I am here in my official capacity, along with key members of my staff, to provide testimony on the status of GPD's physical fitness program and the effects of Public Law 32-232 as it applies to our program. Effective December 30th, 2014, Public Law 32-232, the Guam Peace Officer Standards and Training, or Post Commission's administrative rules, were signed into law, defining Category 1 peace officers and requiring their successful completion of a Physical Fitness Qualification Test known as a PFQT. All sworn officers in the Guam Police Department, inclusive of detention facility guards, police reservists, and full-time officers, are Category 1 peace officers, subject to participation in the PFQT standards adopted by the Commission, which mirrors the United States Air Force Physical Fitness Standards, otherwise referred to as the Air Force Instruction 36-2905. Throughout calendar year 2015, pursuant to Public Law 32-232, the Guam Police Department established, number one, a physical fitness policy captured in General Order 15-001. Number two, it identified a physical fitness coordinator. And number three, it initiated roll call training to educate and familiarize its officers of the post-PFQT requirements. In the ensuing year, GPD administered diagnostic physical fitness qualifications tests in January, April, and July of 2016, with pass rates ranging from 24%, 9%, and 5% respectively. Civilian volunteer police reservists, or CVPRs, have shown significantly lower success rates with a 20% pass rate overall. The low pass rates by the Guam Police Department and other GovGuam law enforcement agencies employing Category 1 peace officers have from the onset of diagnostic testing raised serious concerns over the decertification of well over half of the sworn officers on Guam. In response to these results, the Post Commission proposed immediate alternatives ahead of the final rollout year of 2017 in order to prevent the immense decertification of Category 1 officers. In this testimony, I will discuss, number one, the progression made by GPD as a result of the modifications to the post-PFQT. Number two, outline the training and support gap between the post-PFQT and the U.S. Air Force PFQT guide, or the AFI 362905. And number three, bring to light the factors to consider in addressing the future of a feasible physical fitness program for Category 1 peace officers. With regards to the modification of the PFQT, on July 1st, 2016, the Post Commission held a monthly meeting at the Guam Community College, during which time the Commission requested that all local law enforcement agencies conduct a, quote, modified PFQT to be completed by a random sampling of 10% of the agency's sworn force. This modified PFQT, which I refer to as Modified PFQT version 1, consisted of adding 1 minute to the allotted time for the push-up event, the sit-up event, and the timed 1.5-mile run event with no measurement of the abdominal circumference. On August 30th, 2016, GPD conducted the Modified PFQT version 1 from a 10% random sample of sworn officers who had yet to pass the PFQT as outlined initially in Public Law 32-232. The results of that modified test proved to be proved to not be any more beneficial, as only 10% of those tested passed while the other 90% failed. On October 18, 2016, the Post Commission met again at the Guam International Airport Authority, and the voting member agencies agreed to attempt a second modified PFQT, which I now refer to as the Modified PFQT version 2. The Modified PFQT version 2 kept the same assessment standards for the push-up and sit-up events from the Modified PFQT version 1, with no measurement of the abdominal circumference, and the 1.5-mile run was reduced to 1 mile with the same time standards. The Guam Police Department administered the Modified PFQT version 2 to the entire department during the week of January 17th through the 21st of 2017. The results of this Modified PFQT showed significant progression with a 50% pass rate. Because Public Law 32-232 allows for an officer to be retested after 90 days if he or she does not meet the test or pass the test initially, GPD conducted a second Modified PFQT version 2 during the week of May 4th through the 6th of 2017. The results of that test showed the same significant progression, with 55% of those who took the second Modified PFQT version 2 passing the test. In sum, the overall pass rate of all the sworn officers in the Guam Police Department who have taken the Modified PFQT version 2 to date is at 57%. Now, although those results of the Modified PFQT version 2 proved to be more positive, With the issue of decertification still threatening a significant number of sworn officers in GPD, we look to a more comprehensive review of the U.S. Air Force AFI 36-2905 to determine what training and support gaps exist which prevent GPD from attaining success rates consistent with that of the United States Air Force. With this discussion in mind so far, the Guam Police Department now highlights several issues identified in AFI 36-2905. Prior to the passage of Public Law 32-232, the Guam Police Department established a Physical Fitness Committee on April 22nd, 2014, that was comprised of 6 police lieutenants and 1 police sergeant to develop a suitable physical fitness program that addresses the physical fitness needs of the department, considering the dynamics in GPD. The feasibility of AFI 36-2905 was considered by the committee, and during the initial rollout year, on January 16th of 2015, GPD created a physical fitness policy captured in General Order 15-001. The physical fitness policy essentially referenced the post-PFQT that mainly adopted Chapter 3 only of the AFI 36-2905. GPD's committee was unable to realize any other of the chapters, of which there are 10 of the AFI, due to the lack of the extensive support available only to airmen through the U.S. Air Force programs. The post-PFQT is a segment of the AFI and is outlined in Public Law 32-232, Chapter 3, Subsection 3005, the Establishment of Physical Fitness Qualification Test. It is important to note that extensive support is provided to U.S. Air Force service members who are challenged with passing the fitness assessment. Those service members are commanded to enter physical fitness and nutrition education and a fitness improvement program as outlined in Chapter 6 of that same AFI. Additionally, they are required to attend unit physical fitness training and participate in nutrition education counseling that is provided online. Chapter 2 of the AFI outlines support provided by the United States Air Force Chief of Staff, the U.S. Air Force Surgeon General and Assistant Surgeon General, U.S. Air Force Healthcare Operations, along with 26 other entities in the United States Air Force that support the service members' needs. In an effort to implement similar support to GPD's physical fitness program, coordination has been made with the government of Guam Worksite Wellness Program from the Department of Public Health and Social Services. As such, healthcare screening events for GPD have been administered throughout the previous 2 rollout years. Now, due to the nature of police operations, GPD continues to struggle with accommodating sworn officers in the line units of the Investigation and Operations Bureaus with similar support without reducing the primary law enforcement function or incurring overtime costs. Commanders throughout the bureaus encourage consistent unit physical fitness training with the expectation that participation is really dependent on the volume of law enforcement work performed by each shift or section. The problem is compounded even more when attempting to develop a program for the civilian volunteer police reserve officers whose law enforcement work is sporadic, depending on their availability to volunteer their time to GPD. Understanding the challenges we face with the full adoption of the AFI, GPD seeks change in the current physical fitness expectations by Category 1 peace officers. To begin to summarize this testimony, the Guam Police Department promulgates that it has taken the implementation of the post-PFQT program very seriously. We recognize the importance of establishing a standard and maintaining a physically fit and capable force, as an officer's physical condition could mean the difference between life and death in certain situations. In compliance with Public Law 32-232, GPD has completed the phase-in requirements in Year 1, 2015, with the implementation of a physical fitness policy, roll call training, and health screening. Furthermore, in Year 2, 2016, we have complied with the same public law by meeting the requirements of conducting a diagnostic PFQT in January of that year. We even took it a step further by conducting not one, but 2 follow-up diagnostic PFQT retests in April and July of that same year. And again, for the urging of the P.O.S.T Commission, we have administered the modified PFQT version 1 in August of 2016 and modified PFQT version 2 in November 2016, as well as January and May of 2017. After all the work vested in preparing our officers for success through the U.S. Air Force Fitness Assessment, coupled with the statistical data that we've collected over the last 2 years, we can say with a high degree of confidence that more research, time, and energy is needed to establish a program that is beneficial and advantageous to our officers while maintaining the spirit and intent of Public Law 32-232 as it pertains to physical fitness. Having provided this in-depth discussion, the Guam Police Department poses 3 recommendations. Number 1, that the P.O.S.T Commission convene a policy research and development team composed of representatives from each P.O.S.T Commission member agency to further evaluate the current standards and develop a comprehensive physical fitness program that meets the needs of the entire law enforcement community in the government of Guam. Key members of that team should include each agency's designated physical fitness trainers or instructors. While maintaining the spirit and the intent of Public Law 32-232, the research and development team should consider making modifications in all aspects of the AFI 36-2905, as well as considering optional physical fitness programs from other law enforcement agencies across the United States. Number 2, that while GPD supports the P.O.S.T Commission's quote, proposed verbiage for Public Law 32-232, as stipulated in its April 27, 2017 meeting, we are particularly in favor of the language in item 5B, proposed subsection 3005, line 4, which reads in part, and I quote, "The Commission retains the authority to implement changes or modifications to the PFQT to ensure law enforcement missions and peace officer readiness are not impacted. The Commission may also consult with post-certified law enforcement fitness trainers to ensure training changes are appropriate for peace officers to adequately perform their duties." End quote. Such language reassures member agencies of the P.O.S.T Commission that the Commission truly bears in mind the best interest of all law enforcement and public safety personnel on the island, but more importantly, the community as a whole. And number 3, we ask that the current target date for full implementation of this law be extended out another 3 years, from December 30th of 2017 to December 30th of 2020. This time extension is both logical and reasonable, presuming that we take all factors into consideration and do the necessary work to overcome the attitude, perception, and resistance which in GPD alone has existed for over 65 years to, quote, cultural transformation within the law enforcement community as a whole. In closing, I would like to pose that the Guam Police Department is committed to the overall wellness, both physically and mentally, of the entire force. We support the spirit and intent of Public Law 32-232 and respectfully request that the recommendations brought forth in this testimony be considered as we look to set up our officers for success versus failure. We look for further collaboration with the P.O.S.T Commission as well as this committee as we all work together to meet the needs of GPD and the entire law enforcement and public safety community in the government of Guam so that we may better serve the people of Guam. Sa Diyos Masi para Tempo Mizu, thank you for the opportunity to present this report on our physical fitness program. At this point, I am subject to any questions that the committee may have.
Thank you, Chief Cruz. Like I stated, we'll go through each agency and you can provide your testimony, and then we will open up the floor for questions. Chief Joyce Nicholas.
Today, members of 34th Guam Legislature. My name is Joey Nicholas, Fire Chief, Guam Fire Department. It's an honor always to be here in front of you to provide reports on behalf of the Guam Fire Department. In the interest of time, basically everything that Chief J.I. just testified is pretty much similar, probably across the board for the entire law enforcement community. But just for the sake of the fire department side of the house, we are considered Category 2 peace officers. Make no mistake, we do have a role in law enforcement on this island. Everyone here is impacted greatly by what we do in the world of law enforcement. You're going through the test from the initial to the modified, again, going through the same timelines as Chief J.I. had pointed out. The Guam Fire Department with the original AFI PFQT test is about at 53%. This is after 2 years of building up. But we first started out around 20%, and now we're up to 53%. When the modified standards came into play, we came up to 84% just this past January, which is quite significant for us. Of course, the waist circumference was probably the largest factor for it, as well as the run timing. Again, some of what Chief J.I. mentioned is we supported them on behalf of the Guam Fire Department. But I do just want to bring out a few points that we should also look into as we move forward in trying to reshape the Post Commission and its ability to set standards. I'd like to see that the airport rescue firefighters also be added to this Post Commission as a membership. I'd like to have each and every law enforcement agency have the ability to determine the physical fitness standards that is required of their individual realms or focuses in law enforcement. I do believe in one standard. I do believe we all should be held to some type of standard or similarity. But just like in the case of between the fire service versus my law enforcement brothers and sisters, we do require very different types of physical abilities, physical capabilities in the missions that we perform. And again, I further want to support your allowance of the Post Commission to make those determinations themselves through our monthly commission meetings without having to go through the lengthy administrative adjudication process or through a lawmaking body. And then one thing to think about as we continue to move forward is the adverse action or reclassification process should we come to that unfortunate bridge of where we got to determine whether we're going to keep a peace officer on board or try to find another avenue to not greatly impact their ability to earn a paycheck, but accept the fact that they may not be able to perform as a peace officer. Currently, the Guam Fire Department is the first to go through such a process with our National Registry for Emergency Medical Technicians requirement by law for every firefighter to have. I started out with 30 non-compliant firefighters, and through a very lengthy, focused training and counseling and so forth process, I'm down to just one now. The issue that I'm coming across is the adverse action DOA policies and procedures are very limiting in what we can do as chief officers or fire chiefs, police chiefs, chiefs of our individual agencies to be able to somehow keep this employee who has dedicated many years of public service employed with the government of Guam. Right now, the very first option is only dismissal, adverse action versus dismissal for the inability to perform the job that they were hired for and paid to do. This is something that the Post Commission needs to take a very serious look at, because once we start implementing these type of standards, there are repercussions in the end. And come 2020, which is 2017 came real quick. 2020 will come just as quick. and we will start answering that question. We always have to be prepared for that 10% that might not be able to pass this physical agility or ability requirement that we're putting forth. So that is another aspect that I want to make sure that, or I want to bring awareness to, that we need to address, both as a commission as well as the body of the 34th Guam Legislature moving forward. Other than that, I sit here in full support of the desires of the P.O.S.T Commission to be given a little more latitude, a little more time to implement these health and wellness, physical fitness programs and qualifications and standards. And I stand by ready for any questions as it pertains to the fire service. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Sir Nicholas. On behalf of the marshals, Chief Pangilinan.
Good morning, Senators. On behalf of the Marshals Division and Probation Division, Troy Pangilinan, representing the Judiciary of Guam. I can pretty much echo the sentiments of the other agencies and totally understand their perspective on things. With the courts, we are unique in the fact that we're probably able to adjust more as far as focusing on the requirements to meet the AFI standards. In February 2015, we conducted our first diagnostic test at a 40% passing rate using the original standards. Our last and most recent test was in April 2017 with a 60% passing rate. Again, using the original standards because that's the current law that's in effect. We also took scores according to the modified standard, which gave us a 90% passing rate. So it was actually a significant difference there. Again, the waist and the run requirements of the original standard is what determined the big difference. We currently risk losing 40% of our workforce if we were to implement the current standard and hold the employees or the marshals and probation officers accountable. And that would significantly impact our operations of the court in meeting our current mandates to provide security at the posts, courtrooms, detainee escorts, and maintain field operations. After speaking there with our physical fitness coordinator, Roy Haynes, we're pretty much confident that if we continue to push forward, we're going to be able to meet the standards within 2 years to be at probably full compliance with the current AFI standards. However, that's with the exception of those who are on current medical profiles and medical issues. But, again, I'll just keep my testimony short, and I will be in full support of of temporarily modifying the standards for 2 to 3 years. However, on the condition that we maintain the current AFI standards eventually after the 2 or 3 year time span. The reason being is because the Judiciary of Guam spent a lot of time and resources already trying to meet the current standards, and we're confident that if we keep pushing forward, then, like I said earlier, we'll probably be able to meet it 100%.
Thank you, Major Brennan. Did you have anything you'd like to?
Good morning. My name is Samantha Brennan, and Hafiday Senators. Thank you for having us. I'm the Acting Chief Probation Officer at this time. At this time, I will concur with Marshal Pangilinan and defer to the Legislature for anything more. Thank you.
Thank you. Colonel Borja from Department of Corrections.
Good morning, Senators. On behalf of the Department of Corrections, I'm Colonel Borja. I echo the same concerns by the folks to my right. Providing the stats on our department, we did 2 PFQT testing. One was the standard, in March of last year, we had a 30% passing rate. Then November we did the modified, it went up to about 60%. If we continue with the standard, we're looking at losing about maybe 60 to 70% of our workforce. Again, I agree on maybe extending this requirements another 2-3 years so we can really prepare for this. There's a lot of concerns that are being brought up, and I think we need to take small steps before we take that giant leap. That's my concern. One of my issues too is I've always said to my staff, the cons about this is if we went to meet that waist 39, we're going to go up against inmates that are waist 40, 50. You know, that's not really conducive to our operation. And I agree that we should have each agency representative come up with their own physical plan. The pros in it is that, one, if we maintain that standard and we hit that waist 39, we live a healthier life, we'll be more alert, and everyone can join the Air Force Reserve. That's a joke, okay, but that's the only pros. Again, that's what I have to offer. We're at 30% with the standard. We're at 60% with the modified. I'm open for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Borja. Major Paris from Customs and Quarantine.
Alfred, and good morning, Senators. Thank you again for having us here. My name is Major Vincent S.M. Perez. I'm from Guam Customs and Quarantine. I am an Assistant Chief of Customs. However, I am also a member of the Air National Guard, and so I am aware of the standards as it relates to military members. But in order to make this very short and summarized, I made some key points. And basically, I'm just going to go over how we tested and then just a couple of key points. But it's to reiterate the sentiment of the post-commission. And we all realize in this room how fitness plays a part in your overall well-being. And the Air Force has gone through great lengths to ensure that not just the members are able to do it, but there are support functions. There are logistics functions that are found throughout the Air Force, and it's identified actually in the AFI. Okay, this is one of the challenges that we have, is that we don't have that. In regards to Guam Customs and Quarantine Agency, what we had done was from the months of October 2016 through December 2016, we had conducted a test using the modified standards without the waistline, because we were testing prior to that. And pretty much what was happening is, like, if you don't pass the waistline, you've already failed. You have to pass the waistline. And so people find it challenging or at least for the males, right? 39 inches is the cutoff. If you make 40, 41, and they don't measure it at the smallest part of your waist. They measure it slightly above what they call the iliac crest. And a lot of males gain a lot of adipose tissue right in that area. Okay, so to make it quick, we had 117 officers. 16 of them did not test. And in addition, we had 12 failures. So when you add the two up, that's about 28. So that came out to 23.9% who either did not test or who failed, which actually comes to 77% of who passed. However, because you subtract the ones that did not test, we actually had 101. So that's 86% tested of the total number. Okay, so we had 12 failures, and that came out to 11.8%. We actually came out to about 88.2% based on that number who passed. Okay, and I have to state that as of today, we've actually lost several officers. So now our numbers today have moved from 117 in December of 2016. We are now down to 112. Okay, so military members get into the habit of physical training by way of basic training. They get indoctrinated. They're told when to PT, they're told how much to exercise, and they wake up in the morning and they're able to incorporate that into their day, because pretty much an airman, a soldier, a Marine, a naval person, you get paid for a 24-hour period. In law enforcement, you get paid for the amount of time that you're on duty, up to 43 hours straight time, and then any time over that is overtime. So we're not really the same as the military, okay? So the challenge that we have in law enforcement is trying to find the time to implement the physical fitness program. And I, along with the other heads of law enforcement entities, find that if you're short in your entity, for example, we have 5 ports of entry, and a bulk of our officers are having to work additional hours, when are we going to find the time to implement this? For the people that work 8 to 5, that's probably a little bit more easier. But when every day you're called to work on your time off, it becomes that much challenging. So, just to reiterate, we do realize the importance of the Air Force fitness standards, right? However, if you take a look at the Air Force instruction in its entirety, there are areas in there in which the total Air Force has been able to implement. And so when you take a book of standards and logistics and you try to cut and paste it, it's like trying to take a square and put it into a round hole, and you can't do that. You're going to have to make some modifications. So what we are asking for really is to allow us a little bit of time to be able to try and meet the standards, but also in the wisdom of the legislature to allow the Post Commission the authority to be able to make some of these changes so that incrementally we can meet the challenges of the AFI and the law and the letter of the law. So with that being said, I am open to any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Major Perez. Colonel Roberto?
Day and good morning, Madam Chair and honorable senators. I don't have much more to add to the table. You can see the sentiment that's already been placed across. We've tested our people at the Port Authority of Guam. We have the same kind of numbers. What I do bring to you today is that I also wear the hat, like Major Perez here in the Air National Guard, but I also do so as an additional duty first sergeant. So I'm very familiar with what it's like to write into unfavorable information into a person's file. We do have the ability as first sergeants and commanders to take that warfighter and send them to additional fitness classes, to wellness classes, to attend other things that are appropriate to get that person whole, to bring him to the standard. We do have that 147-page document, AFI 362905. And we took out the standards out of Chapter 3, I believe, if it serves me correctly. But there's 10 other chapters and 22 different attachments attached to it. So, yes, we fully support the endeavor of the Commission that we be allowed the latitude to make the determinations. We agree that there is a standard that we must meet. We want to hit those standards. We want to hit those marks. Make no mistake, the Port Authority Police were there along the rest of our brothers and sisters, and we fully support the entire Commission's position. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Roberto. And sir, I'm sorry I didn't get your name, so can you please just introduce yourself?
Yes, Day and good morning. My name is Anthony Camacho. I'm an investigator with the Attorney General's office. I am here this morning on behalf of our Chief Anthony Blas. He couldn't make it. He had a family emergency. So since the implementation of P.O.S.T, our office has held 3 PFQT examinations. The first one we did in March of 2016. I believe we're the smallest agency employees, smallest number of law enforcement officers in our agency. We only have 18 sworn law enforcement personnel assigned to our office. So in March 2016, utilizing the original PFQT standard. 15 of the 18 participated in this, and only 3 passed. So we had a 17% passing rate back in March of 2016. We did it again in September of 2016. We had some people off island. Only 11 investigators participated, and out of the 11, only 2 had passed. That would be 11% passing rate. So, as it was discussed, they decided to modify the PFQT, and in March of this year, we did an examination with the modified PFQT. We had 13 participants, and 12 passed at a 67% passing rate. Yes. So, just like the other agencies here, a lot of our investigators were having a problem with the 39-inch waistline and the 1.5 mile run. So when we did away with that, the numbers went up significantly. So our office supports the modification of the PFQT standard as discussed there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen, and Major Brennan. Could you please submit a copy of your testimony to the members of my team? They'll be coming up so we can get copies of that. We do now open up the floor for our questions. Speaker Cruz, we'll start with you.
I guess it's most appropriate that it start with me. Mr. Camacho and Mr. Dos Santos Tomas, who wrote Public Law 232-32?
Well, when it first started, sir, the draft was through the Post Commission, and then what we did was we also had consulted with the governor's office because he was in charge of public safety. The lieutenant governor helped us with that. So for 4 months I was absent, so I don't know who made the final draft because I was in medical treatment. So back in December, that's when the thing was passed.
Right. It was introduced by me, wasn't it?
Right.
But I didn't write any part of that. Is that correct? Because I know they all hate me because they think that I'm the ones that put 39-inch waist in.
Yes. That's right.
So please make it clear that I was not the one that wrote this legislation.
Okay.
At your request,
Right.
I introduced it. I had a public hearing.
Right.
And at the last hearing, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 3 of you were at that last hearing. How many times did I go around the table saying, "Are you sure?"
Yes, Senator, that is true. You did ask us, and all the directors, the chiefs, agreed to it. And I'm not denying that. I think we had some great hope regarding what we could do. But however, when the implementation program came through, a lot of the facts that were embedded into the program came to light, and we were not prepared for that. And so that was the whole issue. We had big dreams, for sure. Yeah, definitely. And we were all motivated. And I myself, felt that I could pass this thing, and that the run just it was difficult for me too. So, when I was going through this whole program with all the law enforcement officers, we had a lot of pushback. They didn't want to do it. And I agree that when we first looked at this program, but mind you, we've been researching this thing for 3 years prior to the implementation. We went to New York, we went to, as far as research, Nevada, all over Los Angeles, looking at all the different types of programs. And we could not come up with one program that would help all the agencies because, one might need a gym, like, in LA, they wanted you to do a circular type of exercise with different types of equipment that we did not have. So what we were looking at when we first looking at this program was what was the least expensive, what could be implemented because of with basic knowledge of physical fitness. And we were always looking at the military. Most of us in the commission were like in the military of some sort. I myself was in the military. So when I looked at this, I said, well, we should do this. We have a little bit of knowledge of it, and we could probably implement it. So when we looked at this and we started implementing it, we didn't realize where the physical fitness condition of all the law enforcement agencies are. The fact is that we recognized our problem 3 years prior, and that's why we started doing the research. I mean, we were going back and forth, and when you're dealing with chiefs, of course they want to make sure their officers are supported and they're looking out for the welfare of the soldiers. I mean, their officers. So that's why it took such a long time. But finally, after going through this, and we looked at this thing because it was scientifically based, supposedly, through the Air Force. It was statistically based. They did a lot of research on that, and it was performance based. And we looked at all the law enforcement agencies, and we looked at Air Force, and they have their transportation officers, they have their AG officers, they got their military police, and all clerks and everything. And every single one of them have to pass this test. So since this was already something that was researched, we thought maybe this could be implemented on the realm of the local law enforcement. And of course there are going to be challenges. And quite frankly, sir, when I saw the law, I felt that maybe we could make some changes accordingly from just some of the verbiage. But of course, the AG says, no, we can't do it. We have to come back to you. And just to let you know.
But the law was what was sent down by your office.
Say again, sir?
You guys were the ones that sent that to me. My committee made no changes in the law.
That's right.
From the original
That's
introduction
right. Yeah.
to the passage.
Yes.
I want them all to understand that.
Yes, sir.
Because really, seriously, I was supportive of the 10 agencies.
Right.
I wanted to be supportive. I was oversight chair at the time.
Right. Yes, sir.
And you guys had worked on this for 3 years, and you came to me with a proposal that I was not, I mean, everybody knows I've done some really nanny legislation imposing my standards on some other stuff. But this was not one of them.
Yeah.
This was something you guys brought to me. I introduced it, and I delayed it as long as possible. It was December of 2012, and I begrudgingly let it out because you guys wanted it out. And we were around that table. I sat there. I kept saying, "Are you sure? Are you sure? Are you sure?" Right. And so and that was almost 5 years ago. Chief Snickwood.
If I may, Senator, I will validate that was exactly what happened, as you stated. And I also want to state that we also threw out some caveats that, for me in particular, I felt that a firefighter physical assessment test, which is being adopted across the nation for all fire services, be the standard for firefighters. But all that said, we still agreed to this AFI standard as a basis to start from. And we're sitting here before you as good leaders should do, recognizing that we have an issue that needs to be addressed, and it is my sentiment of a good leader being able to admit their fault and come before you and fix it for the betterment of our organizations that we represent. And so that's why we're here. Whatever score we're trying to achieve, the end state that we want to see happen here is that, first of all, the original intent of this entire program was the health and wellness and physical capabilities of our law enforcement entities. That was the number one intent. How we got here and the way that we were doing it made sense at the time. But through years of trial and error, which can only be found through actual trial and error, just like how we say often in the military, every plan is good until the first bullet is shot. So now we're reacting, we're adjusting. We think that we've come up with at least a satisfactory angle to approaching this subject by virtue of time and maybe incremental steps towards achieving the final standard. And now we're here presenting it before this body to fix this going forward.
No, I just wanted to make the clarification first because I don't know how many of the men and women out there have voodoo dolls and are just stabbing it right now, just thinking it's Cruz that did this. And I'm like,
I will tell you that if I can't speak.
I sponsored it.
As
at
one
your
of those
behest.
three that was there from that Post Commission, the Post Commission holds this flag on the responsibility for this standard.
Thank you.
I would take full responsibility for it.
And
Thank you very
I also
much.
want to mention, Senators, that we by no means want to reduce, the quality or the standards for the law enforcement, but we want to do something that's a little bit more progressive and give the officers more time. But at the same time, if you like, you can also introduce that or implement into the law that the current modified standards be implemented, and we can't reduce it any lower. We can't do like only 5 push-ups or what have you, which might be, some of the concerns that, depending on who the leader is or what have you, and their influences, they might lower the standard. So we can put something in place, in the verbiage, that would indicate that, we have certain standards that we cannot go lower than, and I want to also point out, when the Post Commission, of course, when it was established, is that we want, throughout the law enforcement, regardless of your duties and responsibilities, we just want somebody to, we want all law enforcement to have one basic standard, just like in the military when you have a basic infantry or what have you. So that was the whole premise behind this, that every single law enforcement officer can do 15, 20 push-ups or 30 push-ups and run the mile in 12 minutes or what have you. So this is the whole premise behind it, and we have been struggling with it, and of course, but I believe that we can get to that point. It's going to take a while, and of course, all chiefs can attest to this, is that we have pushback, of course, from those who have been in for a long time, and those are the struggles. We're trying to convince them, trying to get them back to the healthy mindset, and one of the reasons why we were really adamant about implementing something is because we saw a lot of the officers, many of our officers getting sick, diabetic, heart conditions, especially after they retired. Within 3 to 5 years, many of them were very sick or died, So we had to do something, and maybe at the time it was something that we thought we could do, but it was a start-off point, and I think this is where we want to try to do some modifications. But we were concerned that a lot of our officers are very sick because of the type of, career they take. They don't have much time to sit down and eat a healthy meal, so they'll go buy or whatever and get the quickest meal possible. And so we're trying to change that mindset. We're trying to change that cultural mindset within the law enforcement, that we have to start thinking differently.
Yes, Speaker Cruz, again, the Commission takes full responsibility for the public law. And again, we thank you also for your support back then as Vice Speaker. But again, with regards to Public Law 32-232, there were also many good things that came out of that as well. That it clearly categorizes our law enforcement officers, which was needed. It provides also academic standards for our law enforcement officers, which never existed. So although it has standards for physical fitness, there's also other things in the public law that brought clarity to the operations of our law enforcement. So again, all we're asking is for the little bit of support that we're asking in this PowerPoint that we've kind of outlined for you. And with that, I think if given that authority and those requests, I think we can move forward and better support our law enforcement agencies.
Thank you, sir. Please forgive me, Senator Regine Lee. Thank you for joining us today. Anyone else have questions? Senator Esteves?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for being here today. Before I begin, it's based off the Speaker's remarks. I just got to say, glad he brought that up, because throughout the entire campaign, I was always blaming him for all the problems with with the post-commission law. And I did call out, oftentimes that I think that it was a poorly written piece in certain areas. And I have, on multiple occasions, I think, met with individual members of the post-commission, and I identified that specific thing about directly citing the Air Force standard, a standard in which nobody in Guam has any control of. So I'm glad we're finally addressing this. I just wish it's not so late in the game to address that and give you guys the ability to determine what the best standards are for our law enforcement and peace officers. Again, maybe off topic, I really wish, Chief Camacho, you didn't just testify that in 2017 you did all that traveling to the U.S. to come up with nothing. We're talking to, let me
Just
finish.
a correction, I didn't travel, I just used research on internet, not, I didn't travel.
Okay, you said you visited Nevada, and okay, so I stand correction. Thank you, then. Good fiscal mind, but sorry, that just caught my attention. The last part I want to talk about, I guess, would be, again, it's been reiterated with the post-commission, it's not the military. You can't just take one piece of it, and I do understand that. It's been brought to my attention, too, on a couple of occasions, that when you have peace officers who are injured, who are on a type of profile, who are unable to perform their duty, oftentimes they're put into an office or administrative role so that they can continue working. Now, I've always thought of that as being problematic, because when you have a P.O.1 or P.O.2 who's supposed to be out in the field, or, in any respective field per se, and they're in an administrative position, then that leaves one person less on the field. Now, my question to the panel is, are we looking at any changes, considering P.O.S.T as a whole, not just the PFQT, to addressing these individuals with medical problems who are no longer able to perform in their job functions? Because this is not only a problem with just the Post-Commission, but with Guam as a whole, where people who are no longer able to perform their duties due to medical reasons there's not really much there in order to get them out, get them some type of compensation, and to fill that position with somebody both qualified and able to fill that role. And I'd just like to cite with an example from one agency where one individual was in a car accident due to no fault of their own, but because there were lack of policies and laws in there, he remained on the books for 2 to 3 years getting a paycheck, not even living on Guam, just because administratively there was nothing they can do. Now, that being the case, that we're applying more physical standards to peace officers, and we're applying more physical requirements on them, on top of them, to become fit and stay fit, are we looking and projecting into the future as to any recourse or policies that maybe we can assist you with in order to ensure that we're giving them a fair shake at the end of the day, but more importantly, we're able to fill those roles with qualified and individuals who can perform the duties that they're paid for?
I'd like to answer that, and I totally agree with you, Senator. We are, across the board, there are many officers that have not been able to perform their duties as required by their job specifications or job description. And the problem would be, as if that could be changed by laws, how much time can we give these individuals who have maybe have certain kind of physical problems? The law already has something where we can decertify a law enforcement officer if he's not physically, emotionally, psychologically capable of performing his duties. The problem would be, is, of course, through ADA or pre-existing conditions and what have you. But the process is that the officer cannot perform his duties as required by law. He should, the agency needs to look at what his condition is and even get a third party to examine, a third party medical examination, and they determine what is to be done with this individual. So what the current administrative law is that we need to find him another position which he qualified for, whether it be clerk or what have you, to transfer him to that position. And the unfortunate thing that sometimes this can take years, months, And that's where the difficulty is. And it's really also brought up to my attention with a lot of law enforcement officers that are getting maybe hazardous pay or night differential or what have you, and are getting these officers. And I want to make sure that there's clear understanding. I totally, want to say that I don't want to make them as a bad guy. Okay, sometimes you can't control those conditions. It might be genetics or what have you. So I'm just trying to stick with what the law states and what the job description indicates. So if we can do something where we can say, okay, we're going to give you 1 year to get back in line. Let's say he broke his leg and he can't, function properly. I'm not sure what the right time frame would be. And, then we can start the decertification process. The unfortunate thing is that sometimes it doesn't happen as quickly as we want. So these officers or law enforcement officers are in positions that should be, taken by somebody who's active and that can actually do the work. So I'm not sure. That's another session that we can, and I'd be glad to sit down with you and discuss those details and possibly offer some suggestions to it.
Thank you for that. And I think the reason I bring it to light, I think, is just something that the commission needs to address. I'm not trying to mix up your Kool-Aid. I just want to bring something and have a little bit of foresight as things that potentially will be problematic, not only in our current situation, but with the PFQT, as we talk about, on duty, requiring individuals. And again, I bring the same sentiment, as a medic in the Army. But and we have different and additional support that we provide those. And that's the thing I'm curious about when it comes to applying these types of standards, is ensuring that there's additional support there. And so I just would like the Post Commission to start addressing some of those issues and maybe come up with a standard like let's start asking that question. What is the timeline we want to give these individuals? And what do we do if there is no administrative position to put them into? Because at the end of the day, the primary responsibility of public safety is to provide that public safety. And as heartless as it may sound, making sure that longtime employee has a position as a home within the department is secondary from the primary responsibility of providing adequate public safety with the limited resources that you guys have available to you. So again, thank you for your time. And if there's any other in the panel that would like to address any problems they might experience in their agency with regards to the medical aspect and the standards and fitness of those within their organization.
Thank you, Senator Esteves. I had a request from our senators if we'd go by the order of attendance. So, Senator Joe, do you have a question?
Okay. Well, for the panel, for the Post, number one, I'm in support if you just put a moratorium actually on the APFT until the Post comes back and says, this is what we got, this is what we need for the police department, for the fire department, because exactly what the Colonel mentioned with customs. Every agency has there's different schedules. The Attorney General's office, he said, is the smallest. No, he's not. Revenue and tax is the smallest, and they're not even in category 1 or 2. And they only have 3 there. But I honestly believe that on every agency you have different circumstances that drive the train. The marshals, for example, you probably have an ideal program for yourself, but you still have the circumstance that prevents a lot of the folks from being 100%. And I honestly believe that and being retired military, when the Post adopted the Air Force standards, I was kind of shocked. Like, wow, you're just taking something from from a military branch that actually, when you join the military, that is the Bible. When you join the police department, your Bible is to serve the people of Guam. And with the police department, because being a foreign police officer, you only got 8 hours in the day. There is no payment if we do the physical fitness. There is no gym to go to. I don't think there's any gym for any of you, for anybody to go to, that's actually set up for law enforcement. I mean, is there a doctor on board? that will check every law enforcement person, say that you are fit to go and do this physical fitness? Probably not. And then, as somebody mentioned, you got a, what's that, the abdomen? If your gut's too big, you fail the test? I know for a fact that there's officers here in all the agencies that got a nice sized gut. But I'll tell you what, I don't think anybody would come up to you and challenge you. You know, that sometimes that's just grown in you. I mean, you got an MMA guy here. He got a nice sized gut, but I don't know who's going to come up against him. You know, Major Chong. Okay? But what I'm trying to get at is that I honestly believe the posts need to come to terms and recommend what you need to do or what needs to happen and present it back to the chairperson of the Committee on Public Safety, and then we'll proceed from that, because I'm in support of a moratorium on the APFT, on the physical fitness, until it's settled down. And then when they identify, what do you do with police, law enforcement? I know there is a rule at Department of Administration that if the agency actually feels that the officer is unfit for duty, we'll send him to the doctor. Let the doctor say that. Not your PT test. Let the doctor say he's not fit. And if somebody's got an injury and can go out, you know, to the front line, be very careful about that. Just let the medical people do their part. Let's not play doctor, because I don't think anybody here is a doctor. I mean, some of us do act that sometimes, but unless you're Serrano, then I can understand that. But other than that, I honestly support the police department and all law enforcement, and I honestly believe that you do need a moratorium actually on the implementation of the APFT. And I thank you all for your service.
Senator, if I may, just to clarify, prior to taking the test, the individual has to have a clearance from his doctor, and he has to fill out a form. The doctor has to fill out the form saying that he is able to perform this physical fitness. So that need to go. That needs to be done before the test is taken. Just to let you know.
Okay. And also, I just want you just reminded me of something. When you mentioned that on some of the officers, when they retire, they die. It happens in the military.
Right.
That's why people, when they retire in the military, the first thing they do is they go look for another job, and they do something that they normally would do. So on the law enforcement side, remember I was in the police department in 1977, the 19th cycle. And there's a lot of my fellow police officers that are not living today and had nothing to do with the physical fitness, and some of those are all self-inflicted. You know, we have a habit of put foot in mouth, so, you know, we just live with that and we just move on. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator San Agustin. Senator Chong?
Thank you very much. Well, I guess everybody has their opinion about fitness, personal fitness, whether that's a personal responsibility, or whether you should do it like the military guys do because they're on 24/7 and all that stuff. Personally, I think it's a personal responsibility that we each have to take to ourselves. Everybody has talked about the high failure rates in their respective organizations. But I haven't really heard much discussion, unless I missed it, as to has anybody stepped back, has the commission stepped back and taken a look at what's the high failure rate? Is it because we're consuming so much of the white rice and the white bread and our diet is just, we're out there barbecuing every chance we get? Have we really looked at that? And so I haven't really heard, what have we found that may explain some of the high failure rates? Can anybody answer that, or has any kind of...
As far as for the Post Commission, sir, I'll let the Chief talk also. We have not gone into the exact details regarding that, but I think there's a combination of everything. And you're right, the diet, because when we implemented, we wanted also to have public health or have the individuals. We've had some briefings at the airport regarding health and wellness. And then, of course, it comes down again to the individual saying, okay, I'm going to make some changes. I mean, every year we do these things, right? We have these New Year's resolutions. And then there's also that that unwillingness to change. I mean, some people have retired because this implementation of the physical fitness, and they just refuse to do that. And then, of course, there's backlashes from law enforcement is saying, you know, when I first signed up, you know, they didn't say that I'm going to have to take a PT test, you know, and we have to address all these things. And what is required of you as when you first joined in the academy, you were mandated to run, you were mandated to do push-ups, sit-ups, and all these things. Why has that changed? And why did we do that in the academy? Is because we want you to be physically fit to handle any situation that comes in front of you. And so, addressing all those issues, I think we've made a lot of briefings. We've done a lot of things as far as offering them the opportunity, even reaching out to some of the health providers to give briefings and offer flyers that would show that these individuals, you can go and take, like say SDA, they give these briefings on wellness, you know, that they can easily participate in. So I don't really know what the total details of why each one is, but I surmise that, again, it's all those different things.
Has there been, in the respective organizations, have there even been surveys as to what do you consume in a regular day? 5 cans of Pepsi, 6 scoops of rice. I mean, that would do it.
Yeah.
You know, that will take you right up to that 40-plus waistline. So I'm just kind of concerned that we're quick to lower the bar, change the standards, however you want to paint it, but we haven't really kind of looked at the root cause of, and I'm not talking about, you know, earth-shaking stuff. I mean, I tell you, you'd be surprised just cutting out the soda and the white rice and all that stuff. I mean, even surprised Speaker Cruz has left. He says he really dropped a lot just by, eliminating a lot of that white rice that we're all addicted to. So that's the first concern that I have. A lot of the changes that is being suggested, you know, extending the deadline to achieve the standards, you know, I think I could probably buy off on that. But I also agree with what Chief Marquez was suggesting, is that keep the standards, you know, because only 30% of the guys were able to jump over the high bar. I don't know, but I agree. I think we should maintain those standards and just give, you know, the organization more time to achieve it. And then finally, you know, I'm concerned about this waistline stand. I mean, that's a standard, right? But I think there's a lot more to it than just a nice high school figure. My understanding is that the circumference of that waistline really tells you a lot of things. I'm not a doctor, but, you know, I've read things, I guess, in the medical magazines about if you're a guy with over a 40-inch waistline, you're probably a good candidate for a heart attack, and it's indications for other things. But you know, I mean, I guess what kind of blows my mind is it has taken me 50 years to double the circumference of my waistline, and to say that, you know, guys have been able to double that in a matter of, you know, less than a decade just is kind of mind-boggling. And there's something more at the root of this that's a problem that we really need to grab and get a handle on. And finally, the last issue about more autonomy, about changing. I think something like that I can agree, but there's got to be some check and balances in that maybe the commission can make the necessary changes, but when you make the changes, then an information copy is sent down to the legislature, and we can take a look at that, and if somebody says, what, you want 30 minutes to do a mile? Then that might be a little too much, right? And then somebody can raise the issue and say, no, that's really going overboard. or if the legislature does nothing, let's say in 60 days, then it's deemed approved. But you know, I agree. You guys have other important things that you don't want to be coming down here all the time. So I can live with, for example, you know, giving the commission more autonomy to do that. But I'm really concerned that we have not really taken the time to get a better idea of. One final thing is, I was tempted to, you know, to kind of ask, well, this high failure rate, has the demographic profile been taken? I mean, is it all the silver foxes that are failing the rates and the young guys are just, you know, smoking the track? Or do we have just as many young guys that's failing it?
Yes, sir. Even young guys, sir.
Yeah, even young guys. Well, I tell you what, I know of a lot of silver foxes in here that I still see in the gym and take the time to maintain their physical fitness. So I know that, you know, with age, we have certain limitations, right? But still, I don't necessarily, I can't buy that, you know, because I got silver in my hair, therefore I should be able to, you know, so that's my feeling on this whole thing. And I was, when we first discussed this thing, 5 years ago with this post, and I was reading what the standards were, and I said, you know, if I didn't see who the guys were on the Post Commission, I was really surprised that those were not so much the standards of how fast you got to run the mile and all that, but the standards insofar as if you don't pass it the first time, we'll give you another year to do it, and if you don't pass it, we'll give you another year, and it was, you know, and I really believe that, you know, the thing, for example, about running the mile on a certain distance, I don't think was really intended because we want to chase after the bad guys, be able to run just as fast as them, but these standards really are indicators of our ability to do the work physically and our mental health. So I think, because I'm retired military also, I think you know where I'm coming from. So whoever suggested that, and I do agree, organizations are shorthanded. Probably most everybody works more than 8 hours, but I don't buy that you know, that's a good enough reason to lower standards for physical fitness. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tom. Senator Torres?
Today, in preparation for this, I went back to the law, the Public Law 32232. And what I want to speak from is from the point of view of the community who puts their trust in law enforcement for their safety and the safety of their families. The legislative intent, and I'll read from it, the Legislature in Guam finds that there are a number of crimes that impact the safety of our island community, and there should be uniform minimum standards for peace officers on Guam with respect to education, training, and physical fitness. I've been sitting here listening to the circumstances that affect the livelihoods of the officers, how you stand the chance to let go of up to 60% of your workforce because they cannot be compliant with the post standards that were adopted into law 3 years ago. 3 years ago. I understand the challenges. I don't dispute the challenges. But what concerns me is as a citizen, when the focus is more on the officers and their livelihood and less on the intent of the legislation, it casts a doubt. And it almost makes people feel like it's a bait and switch. And where I'm going, and I know that that's a very harsh thing to say, but when I consider that, I can see more time, because sometimes you set a goal that's not achievable. And so you have to modify. That's a normal course in our lives. We do that, and that's acceptable. But what I worry about is if we are now going to grant the Post Commission, as requested, the authority to make legitimate changes as deemed necessary to bypass the AAA process and the legislative oversight, that's where I have a little concern. Because then it's kind of like, it's kind of like a scenario where when things don't go wrong repeatedly, despite your efforts, maybe not your best efforts, but some efforts, that you can keep lowering your standards and lowering it to where it's not even, you're not asking so much of the officers anymore. That's what I worry about, because I want to go back to the legislative intent. This was not about the health and safety of the officers. This was about the community's trust in a minimum standard that the officers would meet to meet their mandate to protect the community. That's where I'm going. That's where I'm going with all of this. So I would definitely be open, and I think it's fair. You know, we do our best. We don't have a certified gym. We may not have people doing the assessments, watching us every step of the way. I commend the court for their efforts. The court has actually, from what I see here, at a 60% passage rate with the Air Force standards. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
That's correct. So there are achievable standards, but you know, we understand too what they invested in their program. But I just want to speak from the point of view from the community. I really would not like to see us to get to a position where the Post Commission has full jurisdiction of amending their rules and policing themselves, because we might as well then just repeal the whole darn thing. Not waste anybody's time. Because that's what can happen in worst case scenario. And I think as a community member, we just want to have that trust and confidence that when we call somebody that, you know, our lives are put on the line, that they're not going to fall dead trying to help us.
If I may so, Senator, with all due respect, with or without a standard, the law enforcement community will never compromise the safety of our people. This standard that was imposed back in 2014 only came in 2014. And well before that, going back 65 years to when the Guam Police Department first started, we've never put the safety of our people at risk. And we will continue to do that, with or without this standard. On April 21st and on April 30th, my police officers got shot at out on the road. And we never once skipped the beat, with or without this standard. The potential for this standard is not about the police officers, and I've said it in my testimony. This is not about us. This is about the people out there. And that the ramifications of this law, if we don't amend it, is that up to 70% of the people in the Guam Police Department will no longer go out there and be able to keep the public safe. That's what it's about. This is not about any of us per se. I want to make that clear. This is all about the people of Guam. And I've mentioned it many times in my testimony that we are in keeping of the intent and spirit of the law. And this is about the people of Guam. But for a law to for the law to impose such a standard, and I got it, it's all about trying to meet one standard and so on and so forth. But the law also says that it's going to decertify people. It's going to decertify, and actually it's going to hurt the people of Guam. That's what this law, in its intent and spirit, that's what it's doing per se.
So then is the real question whether, because this was brought, as I understand, this was brought to the legislature at the recommendation of the commission.
We
right.
understand
So then if it's such an unreasonable thing, then my question is, if you're already at a standard, because police officers have to be at a standard, obviously, or all law enforcement.
Absolutely.
You have to have certain certifications, certain training in firearms, and a certain fitness standard just to become a badged officer. So I guess I'm trying to find the rationale, because I understand the rationale and the legislative intent for putting this standard in. And now the standard is such an impediment. So should the law then, I mean, is the question modifying the law, or is the question repealing the law? Because it allows for modification indefinitely.
The question is modifying the law. Now, I'm not saying that the commission back in 2012 through 2014 didn't do the due diligence and the homework to ensure that as we transmitted it down to then Vice Speaker Cruz, that we crossed T's and dotted I's. We admit that back then, we for lack of a better term, were in haste to identify something or to implement this law. But now that we're coming into compliance of the law, we realize that there is a problem. And the issue here today, and it's never been, and on behalf of the Guam Police Department, we will never say we want to repeal this law or even this section of the law. We believe in physical fitness. We believe in a standard. But you can't cookie cutter the AFI, pluck it out of the United States Air Force and implement it into the government of Guam, because it just will not work. I agree with Senator Ada. There has to be a standard. But to simply take a round peg, as one of my colleagues here said, and trying to jam it into a square hole, it's not going to work. And the fact that there's teeth in this law that says that if you don't meet the standards of the AFI, you're going to be certified or decertified, then that means 70% of the Guam Police Department officers will not be able to go out there and keep the public safe.
Let me put my question another way, Chief. Was this law enacted because the commission felt that the standards of peace officers on Guam was substandard and this needed to be put in place? That's where I'm getting at. It's like, why then did we go down this stringent road? Because it's a valid question from the community that's now wondering, are we then lowering a standard?
Yeah, there was no standard. The bottom line, I mean, if you were a SWAT officer, yes, there would be, or a specialized unit, there were standards. But for the overall general patrolman or patrol officer or what have you, there was none. Okay? The only time the person was first tested was when they first got hired and they went through that obstacle course and all that kind of stuff. I mean, that was even considered during our post meetings, that we do these things. Like, why don't we just use the same standard that we got them hired for? And that was, not accepted by the Post Commission overall. I guess the way we can do this, ma'am, as I mentioned earlier, and also addressing Senator Ada, is we can just say the acceptance of the modified as written down is the standard, and we shall not make lower it. Like, you can't lower the push-ups, as is, but we can increase it as we go along, as we get our professional fitness coordinators to evaluate it and maybe add or whatever. I mean, just like Fish and Wildlife, they have swimming implemented into their thing. The fire department might have climbing the ladder or pulling the hose. But we want a basic. The SWAT team, you got to do chin-ups, and all these other things. Robbery around the 5 mile, I don't know what it is. But the whole thing is that, we just want the basic, something that say, hey, this guy's relatively in good condition. And then if we can adopt just the modified portion, and whatever each agency has that they want to increase it, so be it. But at the minimum, this is what we should look for every. And I understand, and this is what my concern was when we first brought up the changes, is that I don't want to be perceived like we're kind of like making it easier for all of us, and we're not even trying. Well, we have tried, and we've had many discussions with our law enforcement officers, and we've had briefings with the Public Safety Commission, with the Governor's Office. So I just feel that, you know, if I don't want, and I understand that you don't want us to just give us carte blanche and say, okay, do whatever you want. And we won't do that. And we can also provide, you know, the legislature with any updates. And if you have any concerns, we can come back to the table and discuss it. And, you know, like Senator Ada, I know he's full ranger before, right? And, you know, he has a high standard. So I myself feel the same way. I feel like, you know, we should have a high standard. And sometimes we have to push, keep pushing. And, you know, but there are some limits. And whether it be resources, money, time, whatever, there is a reality here. I mean, the court, yeah, they have a great, but, you know, they don't have the same hours that we do. And, you know, of course, like, you know, airport's 24/7, GPD's 24/7. Sometimes they're one, you know, precinct might have 5 officers available. You know, it's just difficult. We're always communicating. Sometimes we have to support them. They support us. So, you know, these are things that are reality, is that, yes, we have this reality, this dream that we all physically fit with a 39-inch waistline. And it's difficult. It's a difficult thing. But yet, you know, what can we do? What can we do now? And then progressively change the mindset, change the culture, and that's going to take a little bit of time. It's going to take, as the chief said here. I am, you know, just supporting whatever the Post Commission says as an entirety. It's a 2-year thing. And, you know, maybe one year we can give you a briefing. Let's see what goes on. I mean, you know, let's just be flexible as much as possible so that we can do something that is not going to cause havoc to all the different agencies.
And we're willing to work with you,
Yeah,
Chief.
okay.
I mean, we understand. I'm just trying to reconcile the concerns of the community and what this is all about. So
totally
we ask
understand.
those
Totally understand, ma'am.
questions. But thank you, Chief, as well.
If I can, Senator, just to help put the intent into context, I can actually vividly recall the testimony or the statement said even by the Lieutenant Governor, Ray Tenorio, Overseer of Public Safety, was making as we were pushing this post standards. The overall intent was really just to create one minimum standard for across the board for all law enforcement. For instance, in a scenario, you got to remember that here on Guam, we are it. Our brothers and sisters, we back each other up one way or another. I can tell you right now, 2 times in my career, I've called 1046 on my radio, officer needs assistance. And I can't tell you how proud and happy I was to see my brothers in blue come in and help us out and really get us out of a hairy situation. But one of the scenarios that was used as an example was a police officer who's doing patrol by himself, which normally happens, is out there and is in a situation where he needs backup. The first arriving or nearest person that comes in, and actually the one that actually told me the story, Rick Mendiola, a retired customs officer, shows up, and they realize that they're both carrying 2 different service weapons, only with 1 mag each, or 1 extra mag each. And they realized that if they came into a situation where bullets were flying, that all they had on them was all they were going to have. And they wouldn't be able to share a mag or share service weapons in case one person goes down and so forth. So the original intent was really to get everybody trained in the same minimum standards, officer survivorship for law enforcement, getting everybody to use the same weapons, because some people were using Berettas versus Rugers versus Glocks. At that time, the Glocks were real popular. And bringing that to one standard across the board, because when the real thing happens that's large and exhausts our resources, we call on our brother and sister agencies to come in. I mean, the SWAT team that we see is a perfect example. The problem with the test right now is it doesn't contribute to what's really needed. And we just got done honoring our SWAT team. I have a very similar advanced team with my rescue guys. You know, and what I mean by this is we need every type of size, body type in those kind of teams. I've seen SWAT teams from New York, very, very similar to the standards that our SWAT team has here. And I'm looking from the outside in, talking about my brothers in the blue, brothers and sisters in blue. And I would tell you, they need every body type. They need that 6'4" burly guy. They need that Manny Chong over there, MMA fighter. They also need that short guy, that 180, 170 pounds wet, that can get into tight spaces to chase the the suspect who ran underneath the house. So we need every body type. The problem with the Air Force instruction, and the same with the Army standard, Marine standard, who, by the way, Marines and Army are moving away from this standard, is that they have this thing called a 3-to-1 ratio. They build soldier and airmen to one standard because they know they can overwhelmingly stop a force by numbers. So the Army creates one standard of a soldier because they know they maintain a 3-to-1 ratio. They can have 3 guys on one enemy at any given time. They never go to any mission unless that's possible. Unless you're part of a Ranger bat, and I'm pretty sure even the Ranger bat sticks with the 3-to-1 ratio whenever possible. That doesn't happen here on Guam and in the real world. Officers are out there by themselves. You never know what they're responding to. Some drugged out, drunk, high, a person out there causing trouble with an assortment of weapons, and they're showing up there with just their service weapon, though the first arriving officer. So this standard doesn't quite contribute to the success of that first arriving single officer. I agree that we need a minimum standard, and I think that this standard right now is just a little too high at this present time. But there should be a minimum standard, yes. But every agency should be allowed to develop their own functional physical ability test to determine their specific job functions within their realm. In firefighting rescue, we need that big, heavy guy sometimes, believe it or not, to be the anchor when we're rappelling down. We don't have no strong anchor points around, and we need to go down and rescue somebody down the side of a cliff. Sometimes we need that big guy. Sometimes we need that little guy to climb up and get into those spaces that nobody else can purely because of their size to rescue a fallen victim. So it's our position, or at least I'm hoping that it's our position across the board here. It's definitely my position that we need to just bring it down to the standard. And so far, it seems like this 1 mile standard without the waist circumference is the solution today. It is the solution today. Barring any other future challenges that may arise, I think this one might be the good one to stick with. And to Senator Esteves' point, there are reclassification rules and regs. I believe it's 4.202 in the DOA rules and regs that talks about reclassifying employee should they not be able to meet the standard, and leave it at the director or the chief's discretion to determine the time differences because every situation is different. Every profile is different, and every employee's needs or concerns are different. So you can't put one rigid timeline. It's the same in the military. They don't put timelines. They give you guidance, but they don't give you exact timelines. And so that said, I still support and I understand your concern, but I think we still need to bring this the standard to a more acceptable level and call it a minimum standard, and maybe even require our law enforcement agencies to each come up with their own functional assessment on how to determine whether a police officer can be a police officer or a customs officer can be a customs officer, and so forth within the courts. So I'm hoping that kind of explains the context a little bit. The physical fitness piece is just a more complicated subject or issue that can't be really classed with the training and the type of equipment that we use. Thank you.
And thank you. It does make it clearer. Thank you.
Senator, if I could just further clarify again. As I mentioned in the recommendations that I posed in my testimony, it's one of the reasons why we recommend, from the Guam Police Department's point of view, that a research and development team be implemented. Because everybody across the board is talking about a standard for their particular agency. And we haven't quite figured out what that standard is yet. Now, while I'm on board with this minimum standard that everybody's talking about now, even myself, as the chief of police, I'm not comfortable that that's the solution. And I think that it would be judicious of us to put this research and development team together to figure out what it is. And then we can address part of the questions that Senator Esteves had brought to light, and the issues that Senator Ada brought to light with the causation of the high failure rate, and why is it that so not enough information is there. And there's no mechanism in place at this point, which is why we recommended that. But we do believe in a standard. At this point, we just don't know exactly what that is. And because of that, we're asking for, which I brought out in the second point, the latitude or the autonomy for the commission to be able to determine that based on what the research and development team comes to play. And if we don't do it right, then by all means, oversight us every day, and twice on Sunday, we will be down here to justify ourselves. Not a problem. And then the last thing we're asking is an extension on the time, because the current law does have a backstop date of December 30th of this year. And that's why we pose the recommendations that we do. But make no mistake, we are on board with the standard. We do understand the spirit and intent of the law. I think I referenced that about 3 or 4 times in my testimony. And really, this is all about our people. It has nothing, it's not about the officers ourselves per se, it's really about the people. And if I could just throw out this last caveat regarding this Air Force standard. While I'm not beating up the United States Air Force, and while I never served one day in the United States Air Force, I will tell you that my designated physical fitness coordinator is a certified instructor in the Air Force. Okay? He's now transitioned to the Army, but he uses the term a force shaper. And his definition of that, going off to be a master fitness trainer for the United States Air Force, is that the Air Force has developed this AFI so that if you don't meet the standard, the Air Force will process you out. So it's a mechanism that the Air Force has also designed based on what he's briefed me as a way of treating and fitting their force. Taking that mindset and trying to apply that to Guam and the Guam Police Department, I cannot afford to lose even one of my police officers to a mechanism that is perceived by their instructors as a force shaper. I don't need a force shaper, I need a force multiplier. And this AFI goes against what we are trying to accomplish. And that's why we're asking for the recommendations set forth in our testimony. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Cruz, and thank you, Senator Torres. Senator Lee, do you have any questions or anything you'd like to add?
Thank you all for joining us this morning and for your testimony and for detailing and describing some of the challenges that we're facing with this post requirement. I think you did a decent job in answering Senator Torres' question, but I just want to kind of probe a little bit further. When we step out of this room, or for the people who are watching on TV or maybe in the news tonight, what can we say to the public, to members of the public who've kind of seen this process unfold, who were here 3 years ago when they were listening to the post recommendations from the commission and have kind of seen this entire evolution? What can we say to them? I'm not comfortable, I'm not satisfied with saying that we weren't able to do it. We're not able to do it. We're pushing our timeline further down the road. I think that's acceptable, pushing the timeline out. But what happens in 2019 when we come back to this very same table, having this very same discussion, and we're still at the same failure rate, or we're not able to pass the members of all your departments aren't able to pass these standards, and we've made changes, and what's the consequence is, I guess, my question, and how can we fill the members of our community with confidence and trust that we have this under control, we have a plan, we're working on it. What would you say to members of the community?
Well, number one, ma'am, is that the post-commission physical fitness standard is actually probably the only one in the nation that actually mandates by law physical fitness standards. So just in that part alone, that we actually have a higher standard nationwide. Most of the policies are internal policies at each agency. So, we've come a step above most law enforcement agencies. They're not mandated by law. So that shows that we have, the willingness to make some really critical changes. And, just coming up here and doing all this research, believe me, we even had committees looking through this whole thing, this whole process prior to the implementation. The other part is that we're not asking to eliminate any physical fitness standards, and we're not. You say, well, are we lowering it? We never had one in the beginning, and so we always knew that there's going to have to. And I quite frankly, when I saw the law, I thought we were able to make some changes accordingly, but through the advisement of the AG's offices, no, we have to go back to the legislature. So that's why we made the modification only after they told us that we can't do it that way. We got to go through. So we're not eliminating it. We always want to have a standard, a high standard, as much as possible. And yes, there is going to be some of those people in the community that, my gosh, you're lowering the standards. And if we didn't have one in the beginning and we started something, there's going to be adjustments. Just like, in any organization, ma'am, we're going to have to, every leader needs to adapt to the situation. And whether that seems like it's, lowering it, that's still up to debate. Because you know what? I know a lot of officers and all of our agencies, we really did try. We did our best. We had the trainings, we had the coordinators, we had meetings, we had briefings, we had health providers come through. So we did our best that we could. And I'm willing to stand up to any person in the community that questions what we did. We did do our best. And the fact that we actually stood up and said, let's make it a law. Let's introduce this. That's saying a lot. That means that we're going to be above the nation statistically. That, Guam, all of our law enforcement, we always do well when we go out to training. That we're always recognized, from our military to our law enforcement to all the parts of it. Even our training academy is longer than most training academies. 18 weeks or how many months? 6 months? 9 months? Something like that. So here we are. We're looking at this thing, and we're just making some tweaking the numbers just a little bit, so we can ensure that this is something that we can implement. Who knows? Maybe 5 years from now, we're going to exceed what the law enforcement AFI is. We don't know, but we're going to come somewhere. And let's try to work with the employees and the community. Yes, they're going to be upset in some way or another. They're going to question the integrity. But I believe I've been in this post commission 6 years, and believe me, we have gone back and forth on these issues, ranging from training to physical fitness styles, psychological evaluations, everything. Academics, we've gone through everything. We do not want to reduce the standards at all. And I want to assure you that I, for one, will be the first one to protest any kind of reducing of the standards to the part where people are just going to be laughing at it. Because it's on my name, anything that happens there, it's my reputation too, as a law enforcement officer, as a chief. Us chiefs, we don't want people to think that we're too easy. No, we want, look at the chief here. Man, that guy's tough. He's not going to take it, no officer is going to have it easy. They're going to have to do something to get physically fit. I have to do it. The chief has to. All the chiefs have to do it. Even the AG's office. They all have this one force that we're going to say, we're at a certain standard, and we're going to continue to do that, and improving on it. And I believe in 5. I always tell all my officers here, in 5 to 10 years, what you see in the law enforcement is going to be just phenomenal. I believe in what we're doing at the Post Commission, the physical fitness standards and the academic standards. Even our supervisory management and executive level, we've changed the standards now. You can't just get promoted without a degree. You can't get promoted, at certain levels. You need some education. So this is a transformation of the law enforcement across the board, not just on physical fitness, everything across the board. And as we go along, we're going to have to make some changes. Before, we never had anything on people with disabilities, training and disabilities. Now we do. From the last post commission, last law that was passed? Now we do. We didn't have anything with active shooter. Now we do have it. It's implemented in the Office of Survival. These are things that we have to be flexible. We've got to move with what is the current threat. You know, now we have in our internal academy we have ICS, Incident Command and System, that we require our officers to go through. So these are things that are just, it has to be dynamic, and physical fitness has to be a part of that too.
Yeah, I certainly appreciate that. I really appreciate all of the hard work that has gone to get us to this point. And I think I just want to reiterate that the idea of a functional physical ability test and kind of tailored to each of your departments, I think is a really good idea. I think that's definitely something that we should look into. My question is that 2019, we're holding to that? In 2019, you're going to come back with these standards, and we'll be able to, and everybody will be at 100%? That's what we're going for? 2019 is our drop dead. I see some people shaking their heads no, so I need to know if this is an achievable goal.
Okay, I believe here's one thing, ma'am. One is that we're going to get our committee, as the chief had recommended, and we're going to do our own research, and we're going to have our training officers involved. We've actually done that already. We've had our training officers involved in a lot of our meetings. The thing is that we're going to have their input from all the agencies and come back with something that is viable. And again, is it 100%? I can't promise you that. There's going to be some people that are going to be have
But
a
we're shooting for that, right?
But we always
we're shooting for
even
that.
with this now we try it 100%. You know, we try. We're doing our best. But yes, we are going to make it achievable as much as possible with what we have. You know, and I think with what the chiefs and all the other law enforcement agencies, once we get our heads together and we come up with a good plan, it should be all right. We're still going to be using some of the ideas of the AFI. We're still going to use it, you know, but we're going to try to tweak it so that it applies to us, but not lowering it to the level of, like, you know, where it's just a joke. We're not going to,
that.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Just two quick points. Maybe this is something that we can shoot for and something that we can start thinking about if the Post Commission isn't already. But maybe we can think about making the changes to the PFQT to not just decrease those standards. So the next time you come back, maybe we'll talk about increasing them. And I also want to just make sure that we're considering, if this is a cyclical thing, if this, you know, we're taking into consideration the stress and the caseload that our individual departments find themselves dealing with every day, if we are, you know, at the end of a long 12-hour shift or a 24-hour shift, we're not just coming home and we're exhausted, we're going towards that fried rice because it's going to sustain us, and then taking a nice long nap just to, you know, restore our men and women that are doing the difficult work every single day. So we want to make sure that we're considering the whole person and not just physical fitness, but how they're doing mentally, and that'll help to improve what we see in the community. And I think also, to Senator Torres' point, just help to strengthen and really restore that public trust and that confidence. We know that our Guam police force, we know that our Guam fire force is just going to come out and they're going to take care of us. They're going to respond in the best way possible because they're prepared, they're ready, mentally and physically. Okay. So I just want to thank you in advance for thinking about some of those things as you come back to us. To Dismasi.
Thank you, Senator Lee. Senator Castro, do you have?
Certainly appreciate the hard work that all the law enforcement agencies and officers here undergo, and unfortunately, sometimes in harm's way. In full disclosure, I'm not going to pretend to even empathize with some of the strict standards that are imposed upon many of our men and women in uniform. I'm trying to be less serious and more relaxed now that the media is left, but in all seriousness, the last time I was held to such a strict standard, I think it was probably high school. Lopet Wall, to the credit of the author, to the credit of the author, of the sponsoring senator, and also to those who authored that legislation, you know, there is definitely nothing wrong with the statements of aspiration. but like the panel acknowledges, I think everybody who spoke here, you all acknowledge that the realities of the real world circumstances dictate otherwise. In all seriousness, though, Madam Chairman, Madam Chairperson, I liken this discussion, this informed discussion, to my vocation, that of education. I liken it to a time when we had such aspirational comments to require educators to embrace technology, all of them, because it was the thing to do with this up-and-coming generation. But looking at your standards and looking at that analogy, you know, the reality is many were afraid, still afraid. Many are unwilling. Many are even incapable of embracing that change because of the lack of training, lack of access to equipment, or even the proper incentives. But I hope that the analogy suits even this situation, because the principle is the same, that broad and wide sweeping reform, no matter what it is in any organization, is going to require time and support. And so I do want to state also for the record, Madam Chair, that I do support two recommendations that came out from the panel. One is the need for additional research and development to look into the standards and the impediments and the corrective actions that take into consideration all variables. That's an intellectual approach to solving this problem. I also like the idea proffered by the chief of permitting agencies to calibrate standards above a minimum standard, specific to meeting the job requirements of your agency. That's a valid recommendation. I do want to hark back to what Senator San Agustin has suggested as well, that some kind of a moratorium, being the former law enforcement official he was and uniformed member of the Armed Services, Senator San Agustin in his wisdom did say, any moratorium that would alleviate, if not totally negate, any threat to the employment of the men and women who have made law enforcement their career. My primary concern, Madam Chair, is in potentially losing our seasoned and highly experienced and highly knowledgeable men and women of the service force here. I think that's way too high a price to pay than the call for a reduction, maybe in one's waistline. Estigui habi sangani hanzu. Zangen lasi na ilai debi na tafantalaika ilai. Lo ni nayen na by who permetti estina lai, if it means we're going to hurt our own people. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, thanks, Senator Castro. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today. I just have a couple of concerns. After sitting here and knowing all of your backgrounds and even getting the honor to work with you in the military side, you know that as commanders, we have to uphold regulations, and most especially physical fitness. I do agree, and I feel that there is a lot of wisdom that you've presented today in saying, allow each agency to create their own standard. And that's very just. However, my concern is, how long are we going to postpone this? You know, 2019, this bill came out over 5 years ago now, or just about 5 years, this law. And so, what do we tell the law enforcement members that have been training for this, that are ready to take this test, that are ready to meet the standard? And that's okay. But what do we tell them? And then secondly, this needs a holistic approach if we are to delay this, right? You shared concerns about medical doctors. Well, in the National Guard, we see our own personal doctors. We see our own private doctors, our own civilian doctors. But we still are required to meet a specific standard in the military. I'm not trying to make the military, the Air Force set standard here for everyone. I think that there was not a lot of wisdom put into it. But I do think that there's a lot of wisdom requiring a physical fitness test for every agency. But how long are we going to wait? So, Senator Lee brought up 2019. When are we going to hold a physical fitness accountability for our members that are involved in saving our lives and saving each other? Because essentially when we go out on a mission together, we're only as strongest as our weakest link, right? If we have a soldier that can't run as fast as us, we have to go back there and get that soldier and make sure that we all come back together alive. So what do we do? How long are we going to postpone this? What can we do to make this better? I'm looking for answers.
Personally, ma'am, I'm not talking on behalf of the commission, and I know that there are many chiefs that want for the 2 years to be implemented, and I believe the chief asked for 3. Even for myself personally, I didn't feel like we should have asked for the extension, but I'm working with other law enforcement agencies, and I look at us as a whole. And I know that asking for 2 years is a difficult thing. Maybe 1 year. I don't know what the thing would be, but we do need an extension, and be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever that you feel that would be justified or reasonable. But I think it's as I mentioned before. We did our best, and we're still adapting to it. We're still figuring it out. We're still trying to get everybody on board with the standards. And it is taking longer than we expected. 2014, we had it since 2014, 3 years. I mean, next year will be 4 years. And so, my gosh, that's already a long time. And I believe that's true. But, at the minimum, we need at least a year. That's what I feel personally as a chief. We already showed that with the modifications, we had a significant increase of people who passed. A year should be, or if anything, again, come back for review in a year and see where we're at. I think that's might be a reasonable thing. We might do it, we might not, but we're going to do our best. But maybe after a year we're going to see how it all works out. But I have my own apprehension about it too, because I don't like the public to see us as a failing agency or a failing law enforcement community. It really bothers me. So whatever the senators feel that it would be appropriate, I will be agreeable to. But we definitely cannot make it in December of this year. Definitely not. There is once we start implementing, the actions should start to be taking place starting in December. Yeah.
Thank you, Chief Camacho. I just want to make it clear that in almost every information hearing that I heard for public safety, I inquired about the P.O.S.T.
Yeah.
Are our guys ready?
Yeah.
One agency said they were 95% ready.
Yeah.
And so now, here we are today, and I'm glad we're having this discussion because we need to address the remedies. You mentioned that in my notes you mentioned that you took a look at the health and wellness, right? But you didn't say that you remedied it. Okay. So what was the remedy for the health and wellness?
Well, again, ma'am, when we bring these things, like when we invite people to talk about health and wellness from the different health providers, they only provide information. How do you do the follow-up? And quite frankly, we never did those things to the point where we say, okay, are you following your health and wellness program or what have you? We didn't do those things, and that's one of our difficulties. We don't have that time to keep following up with individuals, really. To be honest, there's so many different critical things that are happening. We just provide them the information. We give them the resources, and even most health providers provide you free gym. At the Paradise Fitness and all these other places, and those are not being availed to. So, I don't know what else can we do.
If you are insured with Guam, you get free gym membership in the gym.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying, is that the availability is there. Whether or not you're going to take the steps, even if it's 20 minutes of workout, even if it's 15 minutes, we can't force it upon them unless we can only test them. And we can encourage them, we can inspire them, And so I passed my last modified testing, so I'm hoping too that it inspires other people, But we see some young folks, even 22, 20, that are not passing it. Like, it's not just the old folks, it's the young ones too. So this is something that has to be an individual thing. And whether or not they want to, get inspired or motivated, and I suspect that, we cannot keep prolonging it. Just like with, we just cannot. And it's just a bad reflection on us because, just catering. We just gotta feel, you gotta say, enough is enough. Let's get ready. Get ready. And that's up to, I guess, the legislators and senators. What do you think would be fair? But I know the Post Commission as a whole asked for 2 years. And whether it be 1 year, 3 years, that will be up to you. Thank you very much.
When is your next post meeting, Chief Camacho?
June 1st, ma'am.
Okay, I'm gonna be there.
Okay,
And we're gonna work on this.
Okay, ma'am.
But with the introduction, pardon me. Officer Santos, where are you at? Okay, just give me a moment and you'll have an opportunity. Is there anybody else that would like to testify? Okay. Just let me
Sure.
finish real quick. We need to make the adjustments, and we need to do it right this time, right, for the physical fitness standards, so that we ensure that our officers that have been working in the force and that are the most senior can also meet the requirement. Now, the Air Force standard has age requirements also, and so forth like that. Is that correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
Okay. So, but maybe you can wait till 2019 to implement, but the plan needs to be in place soon. If you started to see a decline because of this application, when you started testing them in the beginning, there should have been a plan already 60, maybe 70% achieved to make the modifications to this law. And I know all of you here in front of me, you are brilliant men and women. I know that you can come up with something that will serve our officers, our peacekeepers, and our firemen to help them grow and to not hinder their growth, but to also make them meet a requirement. Senator Chief Joey is my colleague. Chief Cruz was my boss at one point. We may have butt heads a couple times, but there's an infinite desire to work together. Okay, so please, I will be there on June 1st, and thank you very much for your testimony. I'd like to call up on how many are? Can you please raise your hand so we can see how many would like? 1, 2, 3, 4. If we could just clear 4 seats up for the officers and those who would like to come. Thank you, gentlemen, for your time. I appreciate it, and I will see you on June 1st. Thank you for being in Canada. Okay, since Major Chong, by uniform, is the highest ranking official at the seat, we'll make you go first.
Thank you, Senator. I think we're in the afternoon. Okay. Good morning. Okay, first off, I'd like to start my testimony with the fact that I've been a police officer for 28 years. Never have I once been asked about my waist size by the public. I've never had to run 1.5 miles after any suspect. I believe that physical fitness is a lifestyle, And changes don't happen until a person wants to make those changes. Law enforcement officers, by the nature of their job, should maintain a certain level of physical fitness. Officers must be prepared to perform from the most menial of tasks to situations that tax their strength, stamina, endurance, and speed. They must be physically and mentally able to perform their duties to the best of their abilities. The idea of creating and maintaining a fitness standard for all law enforcement officers is because of the overall health and well-being of the personnel. The job is stressful, and doing some sort of physical fitness activity will supposedly help alleviate the stress and promote good health. Another train of thought is that an officer who is in good physical condition is able to handle the physical demands that come with the job, like running after suspects and arresting them. Is there a need to set a standard for what activities should be done in order to gauge the officers as a group? Some officers like to lift weights, some like to walk, some like to run, some like to do martial arts, and some like to play sports. The common denominator among these activities is strength, endurance, stamina, but different people prefer different activities. The law enforcement agencies on Guam use the Air Force physical fitness standards when administering the physical fitness test to its personnel. This was a decision that was probably based on the fact that it was the least strenuous standards compared to the other military branches. The passing rate of this standard for GPD was less than 30%. GPD administered a modified PFQT standard that added 1 minute to the push-ups and sit-ups and the 1.5 mile run, but they took away the waist circumference measurement. However, the passing rate was still dismal. A second modified PFQT standard was administered, and although the passing rate was a little over 50%, this is still unacceptable. The Air Force requires its active duty personnel to do PT as a requirement, and time is allocated during the week to allow for its personnel to conduct physical fitness training. Law enforcement officers, however, work 12-hour shifts and are usually too tired to do PT during work days, and on their days off, they sometimes have to work overtime or go to court hearings, which also impede in their workout times. An option to having a PFQT standard is to create a Guam law enforcement standard that is fair to all agencies, age brackets, sex, and physical abilities. The idea is to have each law enforcement agency submit their agency PFQT results to the P.O.S.T Commission. The results of each age group will be compiled, and they need to come up with an average of a high score and a low score for each event. This result will be compared to the other agencies' results, and the average will be determined. This final average will be the Guam law enforcement physical fitness standards that will be used and for a biannual physical fitness test. Another option is to use the current U.S. Air Force PFQT standards and have a biannual or triannual PT test, but with no repercussion of decertification. Prior to the establishment of physical fitness standards for law enforcement officers, when recruits graduate from the academy and become police officers, they are not required to do any more PT tests nor maintain a certain level of fitness. This has led to numerous officers leading sedentary lifestyles for most of their law enforcement career. All of a sudden, a law is passed requiring them to get under a 39-inch waistline and pass a PT test in 3 years. I stated several supposed positives regarding an officer who is in better physical shape than one who is not. However, there are hurdles when it comes to forcing someone to get in shape. The biggest hurdle is passing the U.S. Air Force PFQT, waist circumference measurement. Most people fail this portion of the test. This can be construed as discrimination, and there will be challenges from officers who do not fit the look. How do you judge the caliber of an officer who fits the look is better than an officer who doesn't? Requiring officers to have waists of 39 inches and under is discriminatory. How does having a waistline of 39 inches or less make an officer better than one who has a larger waistline? Most of the officers who fall under the 30% passing rate are new young officers. Come December 30, 2017, this will be the group that will be protecting the island of Guam with no leadership and guidance. Another challenge is the individual officers' work history with their departments and whether it has been good or bad. If a heavy officer has been doing a good job, which is documented in their performance evaluation reports and awards received, does the new rule of get in shape or else make them bad officers all of a sudden? I want to use myself as an example. I maxed the push-ups. I maxed the sit-ups. I came under the minimum time allowed for the 1.5-mile run, but my waist measurement was 39.5 inches. Does that mean I am not worthy to be a police officer anymore? I have a chest measurement of 52 inches. I'm a brown belt in jiu-jitsu. I'm a former mixed martial arts champion with a 17-8 record. I run several times a week. I can bench press over 100 pounds over my weight. I can pass the push-ups, sit-ups, and the run portion of the PT test, and I still train in mixed martial arts. However, because of that 1 inch over the waist requirement, do I fall in the criteria of undesirable because of this? According to the law, yes, I do. The reality of the Guam Police Department faces is that it has several subject matter experts recognized in court as certified experts in their field. Several of these individuals currently do not fit the look established by the PT standards adopted by law. Come December 30, 2017, if they don't pass the PFQT, they will be decertified. That means decades of experience and knowledge is going to be flushed down the toilet. They will rather retire than be decertified. The Guam Police Department, most especially people of Guam, will be the ones to suffer the consequences. The consequences I'm speaking about is the removal of expert witnesses for court cases, which may lead to cases being lost and criminals being set free to victimize our citizens again. The loss of institutional knowledge and experience that can be imparted to junior officers, and the loss of personnel, period. What you need to understand is that if the current PFQT standards is not changed, then 70% of the Guam police officers will be decertified come December 30, 2017. That means each precinct currently has an average of 30 officers, which will be cut down to 9 officers. The shift will be comprised of 1 supervisor, 1 desk watch officer, and 1 patrol officer. If one of them calls in sick, then there will be nobody on the streets to keep the island safe. I'm pretty sure the robbers and the career criminals are chomping at the bit for this to happen. With the recent rise in violent crimes and alcohol-related crimes, is the priority for the island of Guam the officer's waistline measurement? Does the community care if an officer has a 39-inch waistline when they are victims of a violent crime? I use the waistline measurement because if you max out the push-ups, the sit-ups, and the run, but still have a waistline over 39 inches, you still fail the whole test. Recently, there were 2 incidents involving robbery suspects shooting at police officers. Some of the officers who responded do not have 39-inch waistlines or less, but they still put their lives on the line to apprehend these dangerous criminals. Come December 30, 2017, if the law is not changed, these heroes will become undesirable. In conclusion, if the law is not changed to amend the PFQT standards and its repercussions, and if any of you get into a situation requiring police assistance, keep in mind that there will be a long wait since the 1 officer on duty will be probably down in a robbery case. Thank you.
Thank you, Major Chong. Captain Santos?
Thank you, ma'am. First of all, I would like to apologize earlier for raising hand and trying to get attention, but I really was afraid that you were going to close the meeting and I wouldn't have an opportunity to speak. And the reason why it was so important to me today was because when the P.O.S.T commission started, when all the stuff started, I did go up to say my piece and I was ignored. I got to the point where I actually did give testimony and it was just ignored. Then they had several meetings and due to family medical emergencies, but others, I was off island, off and on for 2 years. I never got to participate any further on it. So I'd like to read some things, and then afterwards I'll give you a few more statements on some thoughts. But I really do appreciate that you took the time to hear me out today, because I really wouldn't have liked to have been not represented again, because all the directors did talk on behalf of stats, numbers, and I think they did a really good job of that. But I think mine's on more of a personal level and how it applies to me and my officers. My name is Timothy C. Santos. I'm a captain with the Guam Police Department. I'm attending this informational hearing and submitting this written testimony to provide my thoughts on modifying the PFQT. I believe the physical fitness testing, a product of Public Law 32232, is flawed and at the very least incomplete. To give a little history, I can remember the exact date. I can't remember the exact date, but when the first meetings were held by the P.O.S.T Commission, Fred Bedalia was the chief of police, just to give you a time period. The PFQT discussions were held at the Guam Community College. I know I attended at least 2 of those meetings where I had mentioned that the Guam Police Department had already had a physical fitness test and plan that was documented in GPD General Order, and that I recall taking that test quarterly from 1984 to 1990s, prior to former Chief of Police Adolfo Scambului putting a stop to the testing. So quarterly I was doing testing, and I was physically fit at that time. That was the last time in the 1990s that I was an officer with the Guam Police Department that took a fitness test. In regards to providing that information to the members of P.O.S.T that were present, the idea of using the Air Force fitness standards were brought up. I felt as though it was already a done deal and that everyone had agreed with the Air Force standard. And all those members were either retired, current of the military, or being either a current reserve or guardsman. I presented that although police department is a uniform government service, it is not a military entity, and its only relevance was that we had a ranking structure and hierarchy that establishes a line of succession relating to who is in charge and our duties that we adhere to. In fact, the military and police have separation of powers and mandates. That separation, if I recall, is P.O.S.T comitatus. That's my history of disagreeing from the start with the military standards and not what was already used and documented by the Guam Police Department or Department of Public Safety prior to that. As I testify today, I want you to know that I agree that the police department should have a fitness standard. I most certainly can benefit health-wise from this. The flaws I speak about with the Air Force standards P.O.S.T and GPD adopt are as follows. 1, my experience, the first paragraph read to me verbatim during the first diagnostic out of the Air Force handbook states, to my recollection, and I quote, assuming you are physically fit, or some wording to that effect. This was referencing to the Air Force personnel completing basic training and should be fit to take the test. My response to that is that there are quite a few officers who went through the police academy, parentheses, basic training, over 20 to 30 years ago. I'm one of them. As I said earlier, the GPD fitness testing stopped back in the 1990s. And now here we are in 2017, and I and others get a diagnostic briefing / test with the opening statement saying, assuming you are physically fit. That was the first paragraph read to us before we took our very first test. Number 2, it then goes on to weight and waist measuring and further testing based on age. Push-ups, sit-ups, running, walking. My response to that is there is no alternative exercises in place. What of the officer with work-related injuries such as knee, shoulder, or other restrictions? An example of the old system is that if you could not do push-ups, you could do pull-ups. In place of sit-ups, you could do leg lifts. At that time, you didn't need to have a doctor's slip to be able to walk the test. It was an option, walk or run. I am told the Air Force has alternative exercises in the manual, but they are not mentioned or in our current post-GPD physical fitness test. Examples, biking, swimming, etc. For the whole duration of the diagnostics testing, there has been a sense of doom and gloom in the air. Personnel were told the truth, that if they didn't pass the PFQT in December of this year, 2017, they could be reclassified to another job spec, possibly labeled unfit for duty, and could potentially lose their job. My response to this is that what tests will be involved in determining if I or another officer is fit for duty? Personally, I'm 53 years old, a senior officer, command staff at that, administrative. I don't need to do 50 push-ups to move from my desk to a photocopy machine. I can still scale a fence, and I can still pull a lifeless body, lift a weight, and drag it if necessary. This leads me to the other point. A healthy fitness plan. A plan that is inclusive of the PFQT. If you want to keep these Air Force standards that we currently have, or even modify them as we have in the Guam Police Department, keep in mind that there is currently no motivation for success. We have a 70-plus failure rate. I have repeatedly brought it up in GPD management meetings that I have a problem with being marked, that I do not have a problem with being marked as failing a PFQT, but what if I or another officer has shown steady improvement from the last diagnostic? What if the officer walked or ran faster than his last diagnostic, or improved the push-ups, for example, from 10 to 20 as of today's date, or lost a significant amount of weight, which is a prescription to improve a whole variety of health issues like hypertension, diabetes, and heart disease. These improvements are factors that should be rewarded, not penalized. I think with a doctor's recommendation that the officer can participate in alternative exercises that will be better suited to his or her fitness condition. An extension of the timeline for this PFQT deadline, I believe it gives me another thought. For example, not everyone is built the same, but differently. Just because one guy or gal can lose 10 pounds in a month, that doesn't mean my body, with all my efforts, will do the same. There is no nutrition component or healthy improvement plan attached to this PFQT. What happens after the officer fails this test? Where is the improvement plan? As you spoke earlier, Senator, the health plan. I am supportive of extending the timeline of PFQT by 1 or 2 years. I strongly support a revised PFQT that has alternative exercises, not based on a waist circumference or unrealistic timeline exercises or distance run. I'm 33 years in time in service. I have not personally ever had to run after a suspect for a mile and a mile and a half. Modern technology and machinery make it possible for me to communicate for assistance and to travel greater distances than a mile. There has been criticism that officers are out of shape and don't always fit the slim aesthetic. But for the 20 to 30 years of those officers that fail the 70% on that failure category, they do this job every day. They've been serving our community without fail, contrary to the PFQT test is an indicator that they can't, but we've been doing it today. And I want to tell you, they've been mentioning that those last 2 incidents of shooting. I'm a big man. I was there at that shooting. I was 15 feet within that building where that person, the hostages were. It had no effect. I didn't have to do push-ups. I didn't have to do sit-ups. But I was there, and I was physically fit enough to do that tasking at the time, just to give you a point of reference. I want to thank you for your time in hearing me out and expressing my thoughts. Again, I am in support of a revised amended PFQT. I hope the Senate body of the 34th Guam Legislature will do the right thing and see to helping law enforcement amend the flaws in this fitness effort. Please let law enforcement meet the goals of being fit in a healthy way and accept revisions to the testing, extend the timelines, and complete the overall program, and change the laws so that we can do so. That was my written statement that I wanted to put to you, but I also wanted to close out with the idea that in my talking to my subordinates, nobody that I talk to in the police department is against having a PT test. No police officer I talk to says that they don't want to be physically fit or that we can't benefit from this. What they are saying is that we didn't have that timeline. One of the senators up here said, well, you had 5 years to do it. Let me tell you what happened to me in 5 years. Before this thing even got to paper, I was doing a workout because I knew I was out of shape. So I was going to the gym, and I tore my rotator cuff. That was on my own time, doing my own fitness to make sure I do better myself. Required surgery. So that's why, although I can't do the job, I requested for modified push-up. Not that I can't do a push-up, or not that I shouldn't do a push-up, but it was because of a pre-existing injury. Okay? But I did that in relation to my job and my health. Secondly, when it comes back to this fitness thing, in that 5 years, I lost over 150 pounds at one point, and I was under the guidance of a physical fitness instructor, again, because this thing was now in effect, where I had 2 years to meet this mandate. I was doing well, and then my instructor says, now we're going to shift to a different routine because now you need to strength train. Well, when I was doing the last part of the cardio, I busted my knee. I had a torn meniscus. I had to get surgery for that. So now I have that knee problem. Why? In the pursuit of this fitness program. So the 5 years wasn't laziness, and the 5 years wasn't not wanting to do it, but there were circumstances or things that happened along the way that prevented me from doing so. And here I sit today. I don't look like Lieutenant Torrey, who's got a waistline and all that, but I'm capable of doing my job. So if I sound kind of off about this or upset about it, it's just I'm passionate about it. Because I do want a PT test, I do want to be physically fit, and I do want to say that our police department and everybody in it does their best every day. And for 30 years, with or without this PT test, I and others have been doing this job. And we've been doing it well, and our best not to let our community down. And I take offense that earlier it was said that, or it was implied, or that was my impression, that we felt that we couldn't do the job or that the mandate for the people that we were letting them down. So that's all I have to say about that. And again, no disrespect. I just thank you for hearing me out and just hearing what I had to say. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Captain Santos. I just want to clarify something. It's not the belief that because you're not to a certain standard that you cannot perform your job, right? That's not what we're saying here. We're saying that, you know, there should be and I'm glad you agree, a fitness standard for everyone. because you perform strenuous activity. And it also promotes your health and well-being holistically. And you're right, there should have been a modified track. There needs to be a more modified track. There needs to be a thorough and holistic approach when you have ailments. Because essentially, if you're overweight, you have other ailments perhaps that can threaten you, as high cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes. And so the fitness standards is not to say that you cannot do your job because you don't meet the fitness standards. It's to say we want to ensure that you continue to be healthy holistically. But it has nothing to do with you cannot do your job if you cannot meet those standards.
But I would like to say that I just don't think that it should be held over our head for a punishment for the officer. I believe that if they're showing progress, you started at point A and you were bad, but you're showing progression, I think that should account for something.
You're right, sir, and thank you for that, because that was also my concern with this post being implemented, is what are you going to do? You're going to require them to do these standards, and then what? If they cannot make it, what are you going to do? You're going to kick them out? You're going to demoralize our people. Our senior officers and those that can make it, we're going to hurt. Our agency's going to hurt. So thank you for that.
Thank you again.
And this is a very good testimony. I wouldn't have known that you lost 150 pounds, but good job.
Right now, I've already dropped 30 through walking and action, and I'm making an effort.
And good job for the recovery on your injuries. I mean, it's not easy getting injured and then having to go back into the fitness. So thank you very much, sir. Sergeant Kress? Corporal? Oh, P.O.1. Can you turn on your mic? Just press that button right there.
Yes, I give my, I'll go after Sergeant Steve Amagwin. He's in the red and blue stripe. I'm just a piece
Okay, Sergeant Steve. Thank you. Can you just introduce yourself for the record?
I am Sergeant Stephen Amagwin from Guam Police Department, currently assigned at Agana Precinct Command as one of the field supervisors. I apologize for being in civilian clothes. I was doing honey-do list for my wife. I realized that there's a testimony that has to be done. You guys conducting something to the effect about PFQT, and it's kind of dear to my heart. I never had a chance to testify the last time when this bill was introduced by the Guam Legislature, because I understand that bill was introduced to the mere fact that 5 of our police officers died because of medical issue. The way I said, that was a knee-jerk reaction to the Guam Legislature to implement our band-aid solutions to penalize our hardworking men and women in this police department and the rest of the law enforcement officer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not how we can do the job, it's not how physically fit you are, it's the heart of performing the job. You can be 32 waist at line, you got big chest, and if you don't have the heart to go to the front line, then that feature is useless. Okay? Secondly, Senator Bisco Lee, I'm going to answer your question, man, if you're still here. With or without the standards, the Guam Police Department will continue to serve this island, and will continue to keep this island safe without the standards or with the standards. We've been doing it for the last 25 years that I've been in this department, and we'll continue to do so without that standards. Okay? Secondly, the problem that I have with the standards is a plagiarized standards. This is not our own. This is the Guam Air Force, the United States Air Force standards. I'm in the United States Air Force. I've served 3 branches of service. United States Marine Corps for 4 years, 2 years in the Army Reserves, now with the Air Force. This is not our standards, okay? I'm going to make it clear. This is not our standards. This is the United States Air Force standards. You can expect our guys to follow the standards of the United States Air Force that they're not even part of, and you want us to make the changes right away where our entrance test only requires what? Probably a mile, not as stringent as the United States Air Force. Entrance test, you're going to expect our guys to pass the entrance test when they apply for the police department, and then they're going to take them by surprise that, oh, you have to have a size 39 waistline and below, and you have to pass a certain number of push-ups and sit-ups, and then you're going to tell them, oh, this is the Air Force standard. This is not our standards, okay? You're telling the guys that, oh, I joined the police department. I did not join the United States Air Force, right? Because that's what it is. It's a plagiarized bill that was passed into law. Air Force standards. Air Force standards, they have several exceptions. I have a medical condition with the Air Force, okay, because of the previous deployments I've gone through. I've been to Afghanistan twice, and that medical exception allows me to take the physical fitness test, okay, without the running, without the walking, because I've damaged my lungs. But if I pass my push-ups, my sit-ups, and my waistline, I'm still eligible. I still pass the test, but I believe this standard does not see that. So we created a standard for the Air Force, and we pretty much going to implement something else. And the Air Force, if you don't pass it, I'm quite sure the same thing with the Army National Guard, man, that if you're not physically fit, you go to the Medical Evaluation Board. The posts, I don't think, have that process. We don't even have a doctor to take a look at our guys when we come in for a P2 test, say, hey, I have a medical condition. I think I'm having a hard time breathing. Nobody there except for the fire department that will make that assessment. And also, one other thing I mentioned is each department, each agencies have a different jobs. We have a different way how to perform our job. The fire department has a different way of performing their jobs. Guam Police Department already have an established general order on physical fitness. And I remember at one point listening to that, to the hearing, you guys are saying that you guys don't want to reinvent the wheel, but you guys did by changing our own standards, by pushing that Air Force standards down to our throat. Well, we're not even a member of the United States. This guy's a member of the United States Air Force. I am a member of Air National Guard, so I can say that is my standard. But that is not the standard of the Guam public safety officers here in Guam. Okay, I kind of agree to, I believe my chief stated that, why don't we do the research? I suggest that we do the research. We do the research that we have to come up with our own standards, not a plagiarized standard that everybody here that will be able to pass. Remember what I mentioned earlier? It's not about how we look, it's the heart, be able to perform the job, the courage that we have to perform the job. So if you give them time to probably conduct the research and come up with our own standards, not the Air Force standards, and they probably collaboratively agree to these standards that everybody will pass this kind of test, and it also make sure that the entrance test for every agencies are the same as the standards that we're trying to implement, not the Air Force standard. Okay, I'm going to keep saying this, not the Air Force standards, because my guys are not in the Air Force. Lastly, I'm going to deviate from the physical fitness, but it has something to do with you guys' concern, right? You guys are concerned about our health, our health, our safety, and all that. But you know, I have several friends that pass in the line of duty. There's no form of insurance, with the exception of the federal side, that will be able to take care of the family. I think I'm going to take the advantage of this opportunity for you, 15 senators, to come up with something, just in case, okay, that our members of our Guam Police Department or any type of law enforcement agencies dies on the line of duty, that the government of Guam will give at least $250,000. The federal side, the federal government, I believe they're giving about $419 for our officers dying on the line of duty. We have to go to the state. Okay, I told my guys, I don't want your name to be placed on that wall. Safety is always my concern every time I go to assume duty. I always tell my guys my mission and as being a supervisor to get you guys home safely. It's not because that you guys have 39 or 40-inch waistline, you guys can pass the PT test. As long as you have the heart to do the job, as long as you have the dedication to do the job, I believe that it's a matter of how we manage to survive. And I believe if you guys can do the research, part of the research that you guys are going to do is to give us, not me, because if I die in the line of duty, it's not going to be me getting the money. It's going to be my wife. I pay life insurance for my family, not for me, right? I pay for it because just in case something happens to me in the line of duty, that my family are taken care of. There's nothing, I think, in the local law, the provision that gives our law enforcement officers that kind of reassurance that the family will be taken care of.
Thank you, Sergeant Steve. I'd like to sit down with you, and we can pull apart the budget, and we'll look at where we can find this money.
Thank you, ma'am.
But if you can't find it, then we need to think of other things, right?
Yes,
So it's easy for you to say, I want this, and then try to put it on the backs of the legislature.
It's just, I'm quite sure we can find some money.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. There's some ways.
Okay, very good. Thank you, sir. And then lastly, please introduce you.
Police Officer 1, Richard Kress. I've been with the Guam Police Department for about 26 years. I'm currently assigned in Agana Police Station as a patrol officer. I came here to speak. Thanks. I came here to speak about the PT issue because I personally find it very wrong. I'm sitting here listening to the leaderships talk, and I see their concern. I hear Customs say something that the PT test, we want to implement it using the military standards. However, the military is a 24-hour job. They pay them to exercise. We're Gov Guam. They don't pay us to exercise. Okay. I hear the chief of police, he's worried about his manpower. Yes, I can see that. Okay. If you go by law, set down by your predecessors, every precinct should have about 30 police officers on duty at one time. That's every precinct. We're currently lucky if we have 4. If we had 30 and we lost 70%, that would leave us with about 7 officers. That's about twice as much as we got now. And we'd be happy with that, you know. Okay, and then we hear about the square peg, square hole, round peg. Back when I was hired some 25 years ago, it was a round hole. So they hired me a round peg. Okay, I've gone here and I'm training and stuff like that. Now currently, they implemented the P.O.S.T. The P.O.S.T., I get the impression they want to make a impression. So they want to implement a military PT style, PT thing under PT rules and regulations of the Air Force. Okay. Number one is, I hear them say that, we made a law, we're above standard, this and that. It sounds to me like they're trying to make some kind of impression. It's unrealistic. First of all, number one is, thank you for the service for the military people. I'm an ex-veteran myself. Okay. However, when I drive into Naval Station or Anderson, they search my car. Why? Because they can. When I tried to go back into the military at age 44, they told me I cannot because I was over 37 years of age. Federal government does not follow, they have their own set of rules. Okay? Over on Gov Guam, you can't deny an in-person employee because he's over 70 years old. You cannot just walk up to a car and search it because we fall under the Organic Act, which incorporates the U.S. Constitution. One of those is discrimination because of age and sex. This requirement, which is the baseline problem that I see, right, is that this requirement is taken from the military, who falls under a whole new different animal than us, for whether national security or what have you, right, and they could implement that. We are not exempt from that. We have to follow the Constitution, the Organic Act. We cannot discriminate individuals. This test you have, I don't know if you saw it, but there's like 9, depends on your age and your sex, you got a different requirement, okay? That, to me, is unconstitutional. And when they start disciplining, can the government and the people of Guam afford the amount of money that's going to get when people start suing because you're taking their livelihood away because of this test? Okay, that is the bottom line. I mean, I'm a patrol officer. Most of my career has been out in a patrol officer. When I go up against a riot and there's only 3 of us on duty and I have the 3 officers standing next to me, I don't care if they could do 45 or 100 push-ups or sit-ups. I'm worried, do they have the skill and training? I think that's where P.O.S.T. should be focusing their training to ensure that there is a standard training for the officers. Because some of us haven't been trained because of funding issues for over 2 decades. We're going on stuff that we have been taught back in the academy. And if you legislators say that we are worried about the safety and the people's trust, well, I'm pretty sure that the people out there would like to have an officer out there that knows that they are trained and have the ability to protect them than whether they could do 48 push-ups, 22 sit-ups. Okay, the bottom line is this P.O.S.T. needs to take this requirement, or the legislature needs to stop that law, because I see in the future, because I would be one of them, right, that's saying you're violating my constitutional rights, because this job is the livelihood of my family and the well-being of my family. And you're going to take it away from me based on something that has to do with sex and age? And secondly is, I was hired as a round peg. If you're going to change the hole, right, to a square hole instead of a round hole when I was hired, start hiring square pegs. Okay, right now, currently, we hire under the old system, give them training, send them out in the streets, and then say, hey, Now you got to pass that. After affording all that training and money on these people, they don't make it, we're going to say, oh, okay, now you're fired. It's a waste of money. Put that as the starting requirement. Therefore, we're not requiring them to do anything more than was required when they were first hired. We don't have to worry about saying, oh, well, Guam gives them free gym, so it's okay. Number one is, I don't got Guam insurance. I have to pay for my gym. So that's right out the bat. Boom. We could throw smoke, mirrors out there to make it look pretty. But the bottom line is this. It looks to me like some people, in order to establish some kind of footprint or some kind of thing, pulled something out of somebody else's that was already proven and wanted to implement it to us without seeing whether it fits us. Number one, U.S. military does not fit Guam. We have a whole different rules that we need to abide by, okay, and that could cost us and the people of Guam money, okay, when that happens, okay. We should establish the standard now, okay. I'm all for it, but establish it now for the new people coming in. Grandfather those other people, because those other people in the past, right, that's our knowledge that we're going to share to the new people. We'd lose them, we lose a lot of knowledge. We had that problem back when we had that max exodus. I don't know if you remember that around, but Guam hurt. Guam Police Department hurt. We lost a lot of our experienced officers because the government wanted to save money and allowed for early out. And then we lost a lot of our senior officers and a lot of people who, Guam hurt, Guam Police Department hurt. We don't want to see that happen again. Okay, so I implore the legislature to review that law and see if I am right in that it is unconstitutional, because I'm not very educated, but anything that's going to cause me to lose my job because of sex and age, to me, I'm seeking a lawyer because I've been discriminated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, P.O.1.
Richard Kress.
Thank you. Okay, does anyone else like to testify? No, okay, thank you, very good. I just wanted to say thank you all for coming here. We are definitely going to sit down with the Post Commission on June 1st and help them to work with them to find solutions to remedy this law. And I believe a lot of my colleagues share the same sentiments. I'd like to thank you for you continuing to do for all the hard work you're doing, for you to putting your lives at risk to protect us and keep us safe. I'm very grateful for that. So thank you very much. Major Chong, you...
Yes, I would like to just, on a parting comment, you kept asking, or the panel, they kept asking the directors, chiefs, what was their idea to correct the problem? And I gave you two ideas. One is to establish a Guam-centric PFQT.
Yes.
And I explained it in my testimony how it could be done. That way, it's owned by the Guam law enforcement community. And the other idea I had was to stick with the PFQT, have the agencies administer the test 2, 3, 4 times a year. Okay, but don't have that decertification as a repercussion if they don't pass. Okay, 4 times a year doing a PT test, that's going to get officers motivated to actually start really getting in shape. Okay, because nobody wants to be the last guy on a PFQT. Okay, but like the Officer Kress said, okay, if we start decertifying people, especially if they've had outstanding performance evaluation reports, just because their waist is not 39 inches, okay, because a lot of officers can pass the push-ups, sit-ups, and runs. Where we get killed is the waist measurement. Okay, so I gave you 2 ideas as to how to correct this, and of course the decertification is going to be a very big problem. But if you can take those things into consideration when you think about, or when you take into consideration amending the law, thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Major Chong. And then if you could please just leave your testimony and give us a copy of it. I appreciate that. The Committee on Housing, Utilities, and Public Safety and Homeland Security will be accepting testimony for the next 10 days. You can email it to us or mail it to our legislature. Thank you very much for coming today. I appreciate all of you guys' commitment to our island. The time is now 12:37 and this meeting is adjourned. Have a good day.